let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular board meeting of the CUSD Board of Education for March 11th, 2021. So let's go ahead and start with a flag salute, please.
Please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Then moving on to item 2.1, board agenda approval. So are there any amendments? If not, could I get a motion, please?
Hearing none, I'll move.
Thank you, Lori. And may I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Phyllis. All right, then all in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed? All right, the agenda is approved 5-0. And then moving on to item 2.2, recognition. So this is our classified employee of the month for March 2021, Uma Sriram from CMS. Leslie, will you take us through this one?
Absolutely. So we are so excited to have Uma here. Uma, these are some words that were shared by your colleagues. Uma is incredibly dedicated, hardworking, and knowledgeable. And she seems to work around the clock to provide invaluable support to our students, staff, and families. She wears many hats and works collaboratively with all stakeholders to make CMS, Cupertino Middle School, a fantastic place for all students, or for all. She is warm and approachable, has a great sense of humor, well-rounded, quick to learn, and handles difficult situations with grace and professionalism. When we closed unexpectedly last spring, she worked with the yearbook advisor to make sure all students got their yearbooks on time. She coordinated textbook and device returns and made herself available to parents despite school closure. During summer, she worked tirelessly to make sure teachers and students had what they needed to start school smoothly in distance learning. When we reopened in distance learning, she supported students and families in every possible way, answered endless questions from everyone, and even helped parents and students with Google Classroom, Parent View, and Synergy. Over the last 2 to 3 years, with the retirement of our 2 seasoned school secretaries, we were down in the number of secretaries by 1. Uma held down the fort, learned and excelled in new tasks, took the time to know the staff, students, and parents, covered for another office staff on leave, solved the Sudoku of teacher absences so that classes were covered, and became a leading force on campus. She is a constant learner and encourages her fellow colleagues to continuously innovate processes and develop new skills. CMS is so fortunate to have Uma. The knowledge base and expertise she has built in the last 5 years is unparalleled. Budget, facilities, student activities, parent communication, attendance, Synergy, websites, Yosemite, independent study, textbooks, technology, after-school sports, IEP meetings, substitutes, CMS website, articulation, the list goes on. All of these, coupled with her multitasking ability and can-do attitude, makes her a valuable asset to the CMS community. She is truly one of a kind and deserves the honor of being the district's Employee of the Month.
Oh, I'm muted here. I was going to say thanks, Leslie. It's wow, truly remarkable the number of things that Uma keeps running here. She must be a really good juggler. Do we have anyone here to also say a few words about
We
this?
have her principal, Jean Wang, and then a couple people, I think, from the audience. But yes, Jean.
Okay, well, let's start with Jean first then. Jean, please go ahead.
Thank you. So board, good evening, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. It is my absolute pleasure to be able to share how wonderful Uma is, and I'm really excited to roast her. Did I say roast? Actually, I mean, I'm excited to toast Uma as the CUSD March Classified Employee of the Month. You know, for all of us here in the front office, she's more than our head secretary. She's our anchor at Cupertino, holding us together. She's a community member. Her children attended Cupertino schools. So she's very active in their school life as a volunteer. And for these reasons, she brings a unique perspective to CMS operations and how we can best serve our community. UMA ensures that all of the operations of our school are efficient and effective while working towards improving our communication and processes and procedures. Like Leslie mentioned earlier, UMA has worn all the secretary hats, from communicating and coordinating school activities to budgeting to maintaining facilities to attendance reporting to being our office manager. She is truly and ultimately the CMS Renaissance lady. She goes out of her way for our families. And, I know throughout the last, throughout since March to now, we have said time and time again how challenging this pandemic has been. UMA has met families at CMS at all hours of the day so they can pick up school materials. And this is really to accommodate their working schedules. UMA has also dropped materials off to families on her way home. One of the things I love most about UMA is that she brings the best food, or she will coordinate in bringing the best food for all of us to try. She's quick to see and point out the humor in the situation and often being the first to laugh at herself. So when she says to me, yeah, I'll take care of it, I sleep very soundly at night. So at CMS, we're all proud of Uma and we're so glad that she is a CMS bear. So Uma, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jean. Thanks for those words that help us better know Uma and her work. And Leslie, you mentioned we had some other folks who like to speak.
Yes, we have one public comment on this item. It is Janine Waddell. So Janine, oh, perfect. Thanks for raising your hand.
So please go ahead, Janine, when you're ready. I think you can go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to echo everything that was said by Jean and the staff and say a big congratulations to my friend and colleague, Uma. Cheers, Uma. Thanks for working so closely with me. We share our spaces and we share a lot of the work that we do, and I'm very appreciative of your help.
Okay, thank you, Janine.
Jerry, I wanted to talk
Oh,
something.
sorry.
Oh, yes, please go ahead. Sorry, I don't have you on my camera here. Go ahead, please, Satish. Please go right ahead.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Hey, Uma, congratulations. Actually, Uma and I had a great time together in Faria, actually, as a parent. And I think just now Jean just mentioned that like how as a community member Uma was, right? So Uma, I think she was part of our PTA. She was part of our school site council. She was our fundraising committee and a very active parent. So I had a great time with her, and her really passion, dedication, and her, the leadership and how she builds the relationship with people, everything is well appreciated. I'm very sure, like I did not see Uma as a school employee, but I've seen her as a parent and a dedicated parent and how she was involved. Congratulations, Uma.
Thanks, Satish. And Leslie, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was not caught up in my public comments. We do have one more comment from the public, so whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is Anu, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Anu, if you'd raise your hand, there we go.
Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Dear Board and Executive Cabinet, I'm so excited to celebrate Uma Shriram as our CUSD Classified Employee of the Month. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of working with Uma. In the true meaning of her name, she is the powerful goddess of CMS. She ensures that our operations at CMS are run efficiently and effectively. And something that I really appreciate about Uma is that she does go out of her way to ensure all members of CMS are supported, our staff, parents, and especially our students. She's gone out of her way to drop off materials and food to our students who are in need and our parents who are unable to come to CMS to pick things up. So she has gone out of her way to do that. I see her more than just an office manager, and she's such a wonderful, dedicated, and loved part of our our staff. So congratulations, Uma. I'm so excited that you are our classified employee of the month.
Thank you, Anu. And Leslie, is Uma here? Would she like to say a few words or?
I think Uma is in the audience watching and just expresses her gratitude for this recognition tonight.
All right, great. Thank you. And I just want to say it's a real privilege to meet such a beloved and integral part of the CMS community. And it was really great to hear about all the things that you do. I look forward to stopping by CMS sometime in the near future here to be able to meet you in person, Uma, and thank you in person. So thank you and congratulations for being our classified employee of the month. All right, great. So let's move on then to item 3, communications, 3.1, employee communication. So I understand that Kai Brown from CEA is here to speak today, Leslie?
That's correct.
Okay. So Kai, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. This has been a crazy, unpredictable year. I remember clearly just over a year ago, teachers had to say goodbye to seeing their students in person and start the task of totally revamping how they taught, how to interact with students, and how to create a virtual classroom online. At the same time, families started sheltering in place, trying their best to create learning spaces at home and reassuring their kids that they'd be all right. And we would quickly get through all this together. Many thought this would be over quickly, and in a couple weeks or months, we'd be back to, quote, normal. Alas, this has not come to pass. Now, one thing I've learned this past year in COVID-19 is that our community, the country and the world have many different perspectives on what to do when it comes to school reopening. There are some people who believe we should be back to in-person learning tomorrow. There are parents who believe this. There are teachers who believe this. And there are students who are struggling and would like to be back in the classroom. Conversely, there are parents who are concerned about sending their children back to school. There are teachers who are worried about their own health and their family's well-being. And there are students who are thriving in distance learning. Of course, there are also staff members and community members who fall anywhere within this spectrum. The role of the teachers union, our role, is to sit down with the district and come up with some sort of agreement, a compromise, which is exactly what we did. The very definition of compromise is that each side needs to make concessions to reach a mutually agreed upon solution. In this incredibly polarizing environment, the Teachers Association and the district agreed we would reopen if Santa Clara County moves into the orange tier or is in the red tier and school personnel are all fully vaccinated. This solution obviously will not make everyone happy on both sides, really. It's important for us to realize that we came together to figure out how we could get our students back onto campus as soon as we could. The district and CEA came up with a plan, one that was a compromise at what different community and staff interests desired. At the beginning of this pandemic, we came together to support each other. Since then, each of us have lived our unique stories to have created our current beliefs. It is my sincere hope we can all seek to understand the interests of the other side and become a united community once again. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Well, thank you, Kai, for coming in tonight to share your thoughts with us. Really appreciate it. All right, so there are no more other, employee organization comments. Let's move on to item 4.1, public comments. So this is a portion of the meeting for the public to make comments on items that are not on the agenda tonight. So if you'd like to comment on an agenda item, we'll take those comments when those items come up later in the meeting. There's a link to a comment card on our website, and then hopefully there'll be one in chat also. And so please just go ahead and fill out the comment card, and then we'll call on you to speak when it's your turn. Leslie, do we have any comments tonight on items not on the agenda?
Yes, we do. We have one comment on an item not on the agenda. So Manuela, I believe her hand is already up. Manuela.
Okay. So let's go ahead and, since it's only one comment, let's go ahead and set this for 3 minutes. That's agreeable to my colleagues. So great, thanks. Manuela, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Good evening. Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'll try to make this quick and use only 1.5 of my 3 minutes. I wanted to share tonight that I'm a parent in our district and a strong supporter of public education. More than a place where kids go to learn, I believe our schools are the heart of our community. It's where our children learn the value of community, of friendship, and hard work. It's also a place where families come together, neighbors become friends, and that village that we rely on for happy, healthy kids shows its most vibrant colors. These relationships last well beyond our children's tenure through the schools. Our schools need this community's help to thrive. Measure A will pave the way for 8 years of reliable funding with which our children will receive the excellent educational experience we all want. However tired or frustrated we may be, withholding support will in no way help. We have a plan for reopening of schools. Now let's get behind the plan to keep them great. I'd like to invite everyone to visit yesforcusd.org and sign up as a volunteer. Together, we are stronger and can shape the future we want for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments tonight. All right, so that closes out the public comments, and let's move on to item 5, consent. So we have an Apple PO1 today. So first of all, would anyone like to pull any items from consent? If not, then I will welcome a motion for item 5.1, please.
I move.
I'll make a motion for 5.1.
Okay, I hear Satish, and then Phyllis, would you second?
I will. Second.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and vote on this item. On favor, say aye.
Right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, great, thanks. The motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention.
It's not an abstention.
It's not, oh, it's a recusal, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, recusal. Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thanks, Phyllis. And then we have the rest of these 5.2 through 5.7. Could I get a motion, please?
Move to approve 5.2 to 5.7.
Thank you, Sylvia. And second?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Lori. Let's go ahead and vote on this. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, let's moving on here. Item 6 into the information presentation section. First one up, 6.1 developer fees. And I think Jeff will lead us off, right, on this one?
Jeff and Dorothy.
All right. Oh, yes, Jeff and Dorothy. All right, welcome. Please go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good evening. Dorothy's actually going to be presenting this, and I think she's having trouble getting on right now.
Ah.
So let me go ahead and I'll hit on this item, and when she's able to join, I'll turn it over to her. But this is just an annual 5-year report that we always bring to the board on the developer fees. What we have for the board to review tonight is the outlier years, or the outlying years from 2021, our current year, through the year 24-25. Again, this is for the board's information. And so this plan, once we present for information tonight, we then post it on our website for the community to review as well. So we'll take any questions if there are any, but this is a normal information item each year.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Do we have any questions from the board? Not really seeing any. I don't have any other questions either. So this is fairly standard. It's just really information for the public. So if there are no questions, then we'll go ahead and move on to 6.2. And that would be the Measure H Citizen Bond Oversight Committee report. And let's see, who is that? That's Jeff and Todd?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
I'm actually going to take that one to start off. So as the board knows, we do have to have, as the type of bond that we have, which is a Prop 39 bond, one of the requirements is for us to have a bond oversight committee. Each year, the bond oversight committee comes to the board and presents their annual report. And so we have one of our representatives from our committee. We thank the committee for their work, and I'm going to turn over to Eric, and he will present the report to our board. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me tonight. And I'm driving my daughter home from soccer practice, and she's a Cupertino Middle School Bear. So it's very exciting to hear her hear about Uma. And so I'm excited that she'll be going back to school soon, and she'll actually get a chance to meet Uma. She's a 6th grader, so it's very exciting. Tonight, we're here to talk about the Measure H. It's an annual requirement to submit the annual report. And the committee, our main job is to make sure that when the taxpayers in our community voted for this bond for Measure H, that the proceeds are being spent appropriately as designated in the bond language, making sure that all the activities that we do, we have meetings that are done quarterly, that are open to the public. And it's been really a pleasure to see all the great work done by Todd and Jeff and their group. And it's been really, I work for the Fremont Union High School District, and I've been the director of facilities there for, gosh, I've been in the district for 17 years. So I've done many bonds myself, and I know how hard work it is. And it's just a pleasure to be a community member and to give back to the community, to chair and be on this committee with the other fine members. We have great news. There's been excellent progress on the in the bond program. The audit was clean, and it's just really a pleasure to give you this report tonight. And Todd and his team with Jeff have done a great job overseeing the bond program, and really, you know, the district is in great hands. So for me to submit this report is very easy to do, and it's just a pleasure to submit the report. And you can see some of the highlights that are in there and the financials. It's just an exciting, I know there's so much turmoil with COVID, but it's nice to know that our facilities are being taken care of by the district, and the voters really approve this. And so I'm submitting this report to you from our committee, and it's really, it's wonderful to be part of it. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Eric. Jeff, was there any more to the report before we go on to the questions?
There are not.
Okay, great, thanks. Any questions from anyone on the Bond Oversight Committee report?
I
Nope.
just wanted to thank them. Good job.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Satish. Any others? No. Okay. Well, thanks, Eric, for your work, and please pass on our thanks to your committee members as well for the work, for this volunteer work for the committee, for the community. This is an important part of our resources to be able to finance capital projects. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, and have a safe drive wherever you're headed.
Yes, we're home finally.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Well, you can dial in from your landline. Yay. Okay, thanks, Eric. All right, moving on to then item 6.3. This is an information presentation for resolution for a contract for purchasing Chromebooks. So let's see, that would be Stacy, Mahmoud, and Amy. So who's going to start first?
I'll start it and then I'll turn it over to Mahmoud and Amy. Just wanted to bring tonight, really as we continue, as we progress forward and look at our technology and the purchase of future devices, how to really enhance our buying power and to continue to get the best deal, and also to be able to receive the devices in a timely manner, as we know that the demand is out there. And so Mahmoud and his team have been working creatively as to some opportunities. So I'll just ask Mahmoud if he can briefly share what a piggyback contract even looks like.
Sure, yeah. So, and it's common practice in education to leverage piggyback contracts whenever we know that we can benefit from, you know, group purchases from different districts, different counties that are looking to do and purchase similar equipment. So it would leverage us, you know, good products at good pricing, because it's kind of like a consortium pricing model. So for this one, this was part of the EdTech JPA that we approved in a previous board meeting, that they're offering a lot of services and a lot of different things that we would typically need for technology. And one of the tools available to us here is related to Chromebooks. We had a recent need for some Chromebooks in our district. And we know that the Chromebooks are also a little bit hard to come by, like a lot of other tech right now. So leveraging a piggyback contract not only gave us better pricing, but it allowed us to go forward pretty quickly and making sure that we can secure the tech as we need it. But yeah, that's it is a pretty standard practice, and it does give us competitive, good pricing, but at the same time, not having to go through, we can get to pick and choose a little bit better, rather than having to kind of go through a process that might extend it out to the point where we might not have access to that tech when we need it.
Great, thanks. And is this the presentation? Are we ready for questions? Or
you can move on to questions. We really just wanted to bring it as information to share with you our thinking along this line, and we would bring it back as an action item at a later date.
Okay, great. Any questions from anyone on this item? Okay, seeing none. I don't have any either. This is really great. I really appreciate the staff looking into flexible ways to procure technology, especially at this time. I know these PCs and Chromebooks are selling like hotcakes. So really great. Appreciative of having this set up with the Irvine Unified School District for this. So great. So this will come back as action then.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. All right. Moving on then.
Can it
yes.
come back on consent?
I'm sorry.
Can it come back as a consent item?
Oh, yes. That's good point. Could we just do a consent, Stacy?
Yes, that would be great with us.
All right.
I've seen Mahmood shake his head. Yes, absolutely.
Great. That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Phyllis. All right. Then moving on to item 7, the discussion, the reopening of schools update. And let's see who is, this would be Stacy and Allison. So please go right ahead when you're ready.
All right, thank you. And I actually have a couple of the rest of our team. Leslie will be joining us, and Carrie. So we're splitting up the presentation, but this is really, as we've continued our work, the excitement as we're getting closer to that reopening and where we are with our phase 3. I think we're all excited about the opportunity, knowing that our students will be back on campus, but also in all fairness, I think there's some anxiety out there as well, because we're entering into a new phase, a new teaching model, a new teaching and learning for our students. And so our teachers have already begun taking advantage of some of the professional development, but we'll be making a shift in a very short time to get into the phase 3, where there will be the students in person and distance learning. And so, once again, I just really respect our teachers for their ability to step up and to work and move forward. And I respect and appreciate our parents' input throughout all of this that has helped us to build these plans. So if we go to the next slide, Jack. So tonight we wanted to cover a couple different areas. One is just always reminding that 4-phase framework. It felt like we stayed in one phase for quite a long time at the beginning of the year when we sat in our distance learning. We had been working over the phase 2 over the last months, has continued to expand the phase 2 and give opportunities for our targeted support students to come on, and continue that through the month of March. We're now looking into our phase 3, and we'll be able to share where we are with phase 3 and our targeted start date of April 5th. We'll also then talk about our the board priorities. We really have been gathering that over the last weeks and months. Every board meeting we talk and get further clarification. We talk through some of the changes that we're facing, what the new guidelines are, and really use those to develop our plans, as well as the information that we gather from the town halls and our emails and other communication board office hours. We really have received a tremendous amount of feedback that have been very helpful in our planning as well. Then we also want to be real specific on our timeline and our schedule for student return. I know at the last board meeting, we'd laid down the foundation, but really wanted to share the firming up of that. Again, our target date of April 5th, and what happens after that, we'll share. And then one of the questions that has been circulating, and we've been gathering the information from parents as they're having their ability of choosing whether they want to come back in person or remain in distance learning. We want to share what those numbers and percentages look like by each site, because I think it will also help explain some of the complexities that we're going through in developing a hybrid model. We have some sites that have a much lower percentage of families that are opting to come back into in-person, and then we have our sites that there's a much larger percentage. So we'll share that information as well. Then we'll also just wanted to do a short update on our safety measures. I know over the last months, we've talked a lot about our protocols for our staff and what to expect for our staff, but really are trying to shift now and beginning the education on our families as to what a student would expect to see when they come back onto campus, and preparing them for that in person. We also have had a lot of questions about using our volunteers, and a huge thank you, I think, goes out to our families and our parents for all of their willingness. I think that's the #1 email I get every day is from a parent that just tell me what you need and we'll do it. And, so appreciative and amazing. And we're in a place now as we move into phase 3 that we can talk about where we will need to have our volunteers helping us out on the campus. And then we'll give an update on staff leaves. I know that that's been under one of our metrics and one of our conversations each week, figuring out where our staff leaves are and how that will affect us in phase 3, and how we'll be sure to mitigate so that we do have classrooms covered. Then we did want to highlight our planning for fall of 2021. Although much of our conversation is around phase 3 in the spring, we also know that this is the time when families are planning for the fall and staff are planning for the fall. And so we do want to talk about what our plans are for fall 2021. And then at the end of the meeting, all of the information that we're providing, we really want to share. We have a couple areas where there is some flexibility and have a discussion with you as a board as to where and how much flexibility would you like to offer up with that target date of the April 5th. Next slide. So our overview of the 4-phase framework, I often think I see this in my sleep at night. We have shifted. We are happy, excited that we are now going to be moving into that phase 3 hybrid. When you can see where it's the cohorts of students in all grades, TK through 8 will be coming back for portions of the school day and or week. Next slide. Just a quick reminder, as we're operating with our county colored tiers, we did make move in the positive direction over the last week and drop down to a 4.2. It still does have us in the red tier. We'll get another update next Tuesday and see if we can fall below that 4.0, which would shift us into the trajectory to begin into the orange target area. Next slide. And I'm going to ask Leslie if Leslie can walk us through our metrics and update where we are as a district.
Great. So, and Kai mentioned metric 1 when he actually in his opening statements. And so, as we know right now, we're currently in the red tier. And so we are working tirelessly to support our staff with vaccinations. And actually today we hosted a vaccination site at Lawson Middle School. And we're able to, with partnership with Walgreens, I think 120 plus employees. And that was one of the things that's really important to our employees is to begin the process of vaccinations. And today they received, those that got them received Johnson & Johnson, which is just 1 dosage, which is super great. And then as Stacy was sharing is the county metrics are looking better and better each day. And so we are optimistic about vaccinations and also getting closer to the orange tier. Our staffing levels, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a later slide, but as we're looking at staffing levels, one is we're looking at parent commitments and finalization of that. So we will share some data on that. We are working with our staff, both in CEA and CSEA, our teachers union, and one of our classified unions to determine accommodations that we're able to provide with remote work, or in some cases, helping staff process leaves, or working with staff on other accommodations that help them feel supported in returning back to the classroom to do hybrid instruction. And we continue to do COVID-19 testing at our school sites, thanks to Carrie's team who's organizing it and our school administrators who are leading it at multiple sites. So next slide. And then campus readiness, we continue to move along in regards to campus readiness. The sites will continue to work on their checklists and work with staff to make sure classrooms are ready and markings are appropriately positioned on school campuses. And we are absolutely on track for the April opening date. And we are continuing to operate our hubs for a little bit longer, and our COVID case rates are low. It's actually been very, very quiet, which is super, super great. So we just thank our parents and our community and our staff for doing everything that they can to remain healthy and also just practice all of the precautions that are necessary in order to keep everyone safe and healthy. And I think we're passing it over to Allison potentially.
Yes, thank you. So now we're transitioning into talking about how we're planning for phase 3. And this slide really captures the discussion we've been having all along the way. As Kai and Stacy both mentioned, we've been on quite a journey for almost a year now, and we've been adapting all along the way while keeping a strong focus on what would be most important when that moment comes for us to bring students back in phase 3. So throughout this journey, we've been sharing information with you, and you've been helping us understand what those priorities would be for you. And so we wanted to reflect back what we've been understanding through those discussions. So the first one that's been very present throughout is that safety has been a top priority, and our goal is to meet or exceed the requirements that are put forth. Secondly, we've talked all along about the importance of equitable, high quality instruction for students, regardless of their learning model. Along with this, of course, is the importance of supporting our staff in achieving this, and recognizing the complexity that's involved in adjusting to new learning models along the way. The third one that we've talked about all along, especially in phase 2, is that some students need more support. And so keeping an eye on students with higher needs and being aware of how we are making sure that they're getting that support. We've also heard from you the importance of maximizing hours on campus for students whose families wish for them to attend in person. We know that the state has required us to provide in-person learning to the greatest extent possible. And you've echoed that along the way too, being eager for that moment when we're able to expand into phase 3. We also have learned via the parent surveys and conversations with you that the special connection between students and teachers and their schools has remained a priority for this community and for you, that we should avoid disruption going into phase 3, and to the greatest extent possible allow students and teachers to remain in their current match and avoid lots of disruption for students. We've also talked about the importance of making sure that students have a consistent experience across the district. So we've talked about that in thinking about instructional minutes and schedules and what in-person time would look like in phase 3. Also, the importance that we've heard across our stakeholder groups and from you about maintaining that focus on the whole child and continuing to focus on the social emotional needs of our students during this challenging time. And as we're getting into that moment of being able to step into phase 3 after, having moments where we were thinking about very small steps to now being in a place where we're preparing to take a big step, that we want to get to that maximized, optimized place as soon as possible and get to that point of expansion and then continue to expand. We're really looking ahead to that moment where we can even be in phase 4 once restrictions are lifted, hopefully by fall. So going to the next slide. With all of that in mind, we have been putting our plans in place. We shared with you some timeline pieces last time, and we're circling back on that with a reminder and some additional information. Our plan is that during the week of March 16th, as sites are ready, sites via principal communication would provide families with information about their specific schedules and the AB assignments. So AB refers to when we're taking that group of students and dividing them into AB groups due to the health restrictions on spacing in classrooms. So that's when we, in order to meet the requirement of the social distancing in the classroom, we have to divide the students into 2 groups. We would plan for students to return to campus beginning April 5th, and they're, depending on how that AB is laying out across the week, it might not be on April 5th, but it would possibly be during that week. If a student was in the B group, for example, it would be later in the week, A group earlier in the week. During the beginning part of April, schools are planning orientation events. There are many, many procedures that need to be taught to students and also parents regarding drop off and pickup and how to move about campus so that we can make sure that everyone is following the safety protocols. And along with that, just the traditional welcome to campus kinds of activities. So lots for students to learn. So in those first days, schools need time to be sure that all of that is in place and everybody knows the routines. We have this as a window of time, and some schools are, it's kind of a flexible window. Some schools are starting earlier, they're hybrid than others a little bit in that window, depending on the complexities of the site. Things like the grade level of students, the size of the site, all of that impacts how much time sites need for orientation and preparing students. So there's a period of orientation. Our schools would be closed for spring break, and then no later than April 26th, we would be moving into the expanded hybrid schedule. Again, it may be earlier for a number of the sites that are thinking about being prepared earlier based on the needs of that site. And then we have been collecting parent input all along the way. That's been happening even this week. We would want to allow a little bit more time for parents to make a different decision. So by the end of April, we would want to have all of those decision points made and be able to implement any changes if space is available. And then, as I mentioned, we're always keeping an eye on those health restrictions because the biggest limiting factor on expansion for us is the public health guideline that we are required to follow right now. So we are not able right now to have all the students in the classroom every day because we're required to have that spacing, the 6-foot spacing for students. So just the sheer number and the limit on the size of the classroom doesn't allow us to do regular phase 4 school right now, but we're hopeful that that day will come as we continue along this journey. So thinking about what this looks like across a week or day and working with our site principals on this, what our plan is that for our early grades, TK and K, and also our elementary SDC classes, we will have students on campus approximately 12 hours a week. So that lays out to approximately 3 hours a day, 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And in many of our classes, we're looking at an AM, PM teaching model in these grades. And that can look a variety of ways, but essentially what we're trying to do there is reduce the amount of time of concurrent teaching when possible for our youngest students and ensure that we have the maximized hours on campus for the youngest learners. We know that students need a lot of time with their teacher, and having fewer things to focus on is a benefit for teachers and students in these grades. And so that could look like teaching a group of in-person students in the morning and then teaching distance learning students in the afternoon. Or it might look like students having distance learning together in the morning and then coming to campus in the afternoon for in-person students. So depending on how a site sets that up. In the other elementary grades, we are looking at that A-B model, A coming Monday, Tuesday, B coming Thursday, Friday, each day for 5 hours on campus. So this is close to a full school day with the concurrent teaching model. It would be approximately 10 hours a week on campus. Again, each site, we have variations in bell schedules. So we're setting some district expectations and guidelines, but each school would need to craft their bell schedule given their particular context and their start and end time. allowing for stagger and all of the pieces that need to be considered. At the end of the day for grades 1 through 5, we also would have a support time block at that very end of the day to be sure that teachers can circle back with students who are distance learning at that point in time. I want to be sure to point out, though, that that does not mean that distance learning students aren't getting anything all day. What's happening in current teaching is teachers would be ensuring that students at home and in the classroom are receiving instruction throughout the day. All students have the same instructional minutes, and that can include all of the tools that are already happening right now, sometimes whole group time, sometimes small group time, sometimes online, sometimes offline. It doesn't mean 100% live streaming all the time. In the middle school grades, it would be the same A-B model using the same basic structure that we have now, 4 hours at a time, twice a week, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, going through their middle school periods. And again, approximate, there can be variations based on the schedules at each middle school. And then the office hours at the after lunch time block to be sure that students who need more support or have questions can get it. And we are also developing a common set of district guidelines. This happened for distance learning as well. You may remember it's a set of agreements, guiding principles, guidance that help sites know where their flexibility is and where we are achieving consistency across the school sites. So we've been working with our principals and getting feedback from staffs on that. And we're in a draft form right now, testing out our thinking, trying to make sure that that's very clear, and also partnering with CEA to be sure that all of the information that staffs need is captured there. And that allows us to be sure that we're having consistency, equitable experiences, but also flexibility for teachers and school sites to be sure that that they can achieve all of those things in a way that's actually going to work at the site or in the classroom. So on this slide, this is our initial data. I want to say up front that this is changing, you know, in the moment, and Leslie will add on to this in a bit here. But we've been collecting information from parents in an initial survey, and then just recently parents expressed if they wanted to change their data, their choice. So this is not the updated data because we're literally crunching that data today, but we still thought it was valuable to share with you because it illustrates the wide range of conditions that we are facing at each school site. And so we have in the yellow, these are our elementary schools that initially were planning for less than 50% of their students to return in person based on parent choice. And when you look at these numbers, you can see there's quite a lot of variation even within this group, right? Some are closer to 1/4 or 1/3, some are close to that 1/2 mark. And then in the turquoise, we have more than 50%. And again, some are really close to that half mark, some are stretching much higher than that. And the important thing here is just to recognize that our sites value the consistency and the framework that we're setting, but they also have been asking us to give them as much flexibility as they can so that they can meet the needs of their students and families. All of the comments that I'm hearing from our staff, our principals, our teachers, other staff, everyone is very focused on making sure that we can do the very best job we can, knowing that we are going into a new model. And so being able to provide flexibility is a critical element for for our sites to feel that they're doing the very best job that they can. So consistency plus flexibility is part of our recommendation. The same is true in middle school. On the next slide, we have a mix of responses, and this data has been changing. Leslie, were you wanting to add on now about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the data that we just collected from parents, where they were reminded of their selection and given an opportunity to request a shift in program, what we noticed, and it's funny how this works with our TK8 population, but 18% of our parents that responded to this form actually requested a shift as of today. And it was 18% at elementary, and it was 18% at middle school. In elementary school, 11% of the families that wanted to shift were asking to shift actually to distance learning, whereas 24% of those that wanted to shift were asking to shift to hybrid. And so really what is happening now is our principals are taking their initial configurations and they are revising them, because our goal is to be able to allow for such shifts to happen. And at middle school, 14, almost 15% wanted to shift to distance learning out of that 18%, and 11, almost 12% wanted to shift to hybrid. So we don't anticipate middle schools having to do too much. They're going to be swapping kids in programs, but hopefully it doesn't create too much of a disrupt to school campuses and to the AABB schedules that they were looking at. And our elementary schools will have a little bit more work to do in regards to formation of classrooms and their schedules. So they'll need a little bit of time to do that, and we'll be notifying parents, as Allison said, soon.
So these next couple slides really wanted to have an opportunity just to show some samples of what it looks like when we're talking about breaking the groups into the A's and B's. We've also had a lot of feedback from some of our families that are saying, you know, why are we only able to offer 2 days versus the 4 days? So I wanted to give an example. Currently with our TK third grades, we're at a 24-to-1, 24 students for every 1 teacher. So this could occur within the same school. We could have a classroom in teacher classroom 1, teacher classroom 2. And under classroom 1, the teacher has 24 students and 12 families have elected to come back into in-person and 12 have selected to stay in distance learning. What that would allow us to do is we could break the 12 in-person students into 2 small groups. They could become an A group and a B group. It would be 6 students in each of those groups, and it would allow the groups to grow. As we know that some families may, as we progress along in our tiers and our reopening, they may choose that they do want to come into in-person, and so these groups could continue to grow. We could also then take those 12 students and keep them into one group, a group A, and have them meet as a larger group. Again, there's still an opportunity for that class to grow and expand in their in-person. We are right now, as Allison has mentioned, with one of our biggest restrictions, it really is the spacing in the classrooms and maintaining that 6-foot distancing. With the majority of our classrooms and our square footage, we know that we can fit approximately 14 students. We do have a few larger areas. We do have a few areas that are smaller, and each of the sites are working through that. So 14 is our average number of students that we can fit into most of our classrooms. If you look across the hallway in classroom teacher 2, they also have 24 students assigned to them. But under this class, 18 families have elected to come back in person and 6 want to remain in distance learning. That would create 2 groups, a group A with 9 students and a group B with 9 students. Each of those groups could still continue to grow if we had additional parents that wanted to elect to come back into in-person, but we wouldn't be able to combine the group into one large group. We'd then have 18 students. So we couldn't do the 4 days a week. We would have to maintain 2 groups with that particular scenario. So keep that in mind as we talk later on about the flexibility and consistencies across the district, and we can move on to the next example. And using the same formula, our current ratio with our 4th and 5th grade teachers are 33 students to 1 teacher. So again, we built our numbers around the spacing in our classroom, utilizing that 6-foot spacing and the square footage in our average classroom. In this example, classroom teacher 1 has 33 students, and out of those 33 students, 14 students have selected to come back in person and 19 remain in distance learning. Those 14 students could be grouped together as one large group of 14, or they could be grouped together into 2 groups of 7 and allowing the space to expand as families want to opt to come back in person further into April. Across the hall, our teacher 2 also has 33 students, but in this scenario, 18 of their students are coming back to in-person and 15 have elected to stay in distance learning. And again, due to the size of that 18 in-person group, we would be required to split them into 2 groups, an A model and a B model, so they would only be able to come 2 days a week. So part of this is our complexity, is that we typically have this across the entire district. Our numbers do not fit nicely. We don't have one particular campus that it all fits into a model A. We don't have one campus that they all fit into a model A and B. They are mixed across. And so for this, we would have 2 classrooms, same grade level, one that could do an A-B model and one that could do just an A model. Next example. And this one is really showing our middle school. Again, we are still under the 6-foot requirement spacing, looking at the average size of our square footage for our classrooms. For this example, it's the entire school population. And so we have 340 students that have elected to come back to in-person, and we have 660 wanting to remain in distance learning. Out of those 340 students in person, we would split them into an A group and a B group. So the guidelines do allow a much more, a larger stable cohort at our middle schools. And so that 170 in-person students becomes a cohort. Within that 170, those students would be attending 3 periods throughout the day on period group A, and then group B would come in and do 3 periods the following day, either on an AB or an AABB type model. Again, due to the size, to create a large one single cohort of 340 students doesn't allow us to maintain that 6-foot social distancing throughout the campus. And I'm going to turn it back over to Leslie, and she'll talk about the leads.
Okay, great. So we are working with all of our employees in order to support them in a safe return to work or to in-person work. Most of our SEIU employees have been working since the beginning of COVID. And so when we look at requests for leaves or accommodations, we've been able to be responsive to those along the way. And a lot of that has been training and ensuring we have appropriate PPE for those employees or all of our employees. What I wanted to show you here is CEA is our teachers union. And what we have received are requests for accommodations. So most of these are not requests for full leaves. These are requests for accommodations, which primarily are requests for distance learning only positions. And so as our administrators are looking at their numbers across the campus, in some cases that may be easier to accommodate, in other cases much more difficult based on the number of students returning to campus. And so working with our union group, we prioritized, and it's part of the MOU, we've prioritized as we look at these requests for accommodations, we first look at our unit members who are in high-risk categories. Then we look at our unit members who may be living with or who are living with someone that is in a high-risk category. And then priority 3 is sort of falls into that other bucket where there are other situations that may not be medical, that are needs for a distance learning only position. And so we are working through these in collaboration with employees, certainly. We engage in conversations with them and interactive conversations with them to see if we can make accommodations to support their return to work. In some cases, we have and will approve accommodations, and in others, we will not. And then if we are not able to approve an accommodation, then we do work with staff if necessary and on leave rights and leave decisions. But we're hoping that we are able to get as many employees back on campus as possible. We're also working with our classified union CSEA. I don't have that data broken down in the same way here, but we have 42 employees at this point that we are involved in interactive conversations with them. And their leave requests or accommodation requests fall under similar reasons: high risk for an employee, an individual in the home who is high risk, or just another personal need. And so we will continue working through that. And our Human Resources Department is also working really hard to bring additional substitutes in our fold to be able to support should we have absences or longer term needs. We're going to turn it over to Carrie.
Hi, I'm here tonight to represent our health and safety team. And we've had a lot of community comments and just community wanting to know a little bit more about our safety protocols and how we're moving forward. So just a few reminders. I think you've heard some of this as we were talking about our phase 2 classrooms, but things that we are putting in place as we move into phase 3. We want to make sure that everybody understands that all staff and all students will be required to do a daily symptom check prior to coming to campus. We are working on a face covering, so everybody must wear a face covering. That's all staff and all students. And the only time that they would not be wearing their face covering is when they're eating and drinking. And the recommendation is that's done outdoors whenever possible. In addition to that, we need to have a location or a place for the kids to put their masks when they're not wearing them. And so we've come up with a clip process. We tried paper bags, but kids popping paper bags is just not a no-go. And so we've come up with a clipping process where they can clip them either onto their backpacks for middle schoolers type thing, or elementary kids could clip them to their t-shirts, their article of clothing, etc. We know that one of the other major mitigation factors is hand hygiene. So we have set up classroom protocols where anybody entering and exiting a classroom, entering or exiting a classroom will be asked to wash their hands. So you're washing your hands on your way out of the room, and you're washing your hands in the way into the room. We call that hand hygiene. The other thing that we're also doing is before somebody eats, they need to make sure that they wash their hands. And when we talk about hand washing, we're actually asking for hand washing. So if there's a sink in the classroom, we are going to require that it's hand washing and not hand sanitizer. And that is just, those are the basic guidelines for health and safety, that it really should be hand washing. If a classroom does not have a sink, which we're trying to avoid in all circumstances, but if there is a situation where there was not a sink available, teachers would look at hands. If hands are soiled, they'd be asked to go to the restroom, wash their hands, and then get back in line and do hand sanitizer before they entered their classroom. Another major issue that we know that mitigates is 6 feet social distance. There's also a lot of research out there that's really actually 3 feet, 4 feet's a buffer, but we are going 6. So 6 feet is what we are trying to maintain at all times at our school. We do know that there are times that people will pass each other quickly, or somebody will go in, maybe address something and then get back out. But the idea is we really are encouraging people to stay 6 feet apart. The other thing is within our classrooms, we are set the guidelines, and these are the state guidelines, that we must keep our desks 6 feet apart from each other, or their chairs, not desks, but their chairs 6 feet apart from each other at all times. The only time we can go off that is when we have put every other measure in place in order to create that 6 feet distance, meaning we've put in hybrid schedules. So we have A/B schedule type things where we have maybe created some outdoor spaces just outside the classroom. So we are required to keep the 6 feet unless there's a circumstance, and we would have to be able to explain that circumstance in order to keep it under 6 feet. And the minimum is absolutely 4 feet under any circumstances. The other thing is we've always promised as a district that we would do more. And so part of that more is a lot of our community, a lot of teachers ask for desk shields. So we are providing a desk shield right now currently for all students in the classroom. So that'll add an extra barrier just in case. And then we do know that between groups, high touch surfaces like a desk, for instance, need to be wiped down. So we do know that if in any shared space where one group will be going in, another group will be sitting down, the desks need to be wiped down prior to the children, the new group coming in. In elementary school, one of the other mitigation is that all the stable groups need to stay separate. They need to be 25 feet away from each other. And so that's also one of the big things that in elementary is a little bit different than middle school, where it's 6 feet all the time. In elementary, we also do 6 feet all the time, but also the encouragement is that each stable group in elementary school are required to be 25 feet apart. So that is 25 feet apart. In the classroom, that's easy because you're separated by your walls, but outdoor spaces will be marked off. So classroom A will be in this space, classroom 2 will be over here, classroom 3 will be assigned over here, etc. And so you'll see a lot of that going on. The other thing that we need to do is we have to create a space that is different for injured students that are going to the office and those children that are ill with COVID symptoms. So we are creating 2 separate spaces in order to decrease any chance of contaminating or exposure. And we also are required to do notification of staff and families if there is a positive case in their classroom or your school. So we will be providing all that information, as well as if you were in close contact. Now, close contact, the definition is you were within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or more within a 24-hour period. So our encouragement is that nobody should really be doing that. We want to keep everybody 6 feet apart so that we're not causing close contact. The other thing that was just recently added that it's within a 24-hour period, but it's also within the last 48 hours. So it matters. We have to, when we contact trace, we don't have to just contact trace today and yesterday, and we also have to add one more day to that on the flip side. So we're using those kind of things for contact tracing. That goes on to that. And then the next part is a lot of our community wanted to know, what is it that you're going to do if there's a positive case or symptoms at school? So we thought we would share that information. This is just a brief overview. But basically, if you are COVID-19 symptomatic, you are required to stay home, or if you are at school, you are required to go home immediately, be sent home immediately. That is for both staff as well as for students. The only way that you can return if you had a COVID-19 symptom that you didn't pass a symptom check or you got sick would be that you would have to either provide the district with a negative COVID test so that you return earlier, or you would have to return with a doctor's note. And the doctor's note, we are required for it to have 3 things on it. It must indicate that you have been medically evaluated. So it can't just simply be a note saying Carrie is excused. It actually has to show that the doctor actually met with me and saw me. So it's a medical evaluation occurred. It has to provide an alternative explanation than why it's not COVID, and has to explain why the specific symptom is not related to COVID-19. So it might be an allergy, it might be an asthma situation, but whatever it is, it has to actually come with a doctor's note. We have to have a doctor's note. So that would allow you to come back to school. Or the last thing that you could do is either, if neither one of those things are possible, you would have to home isolate for 10 days. And on the 11th day, if you do not have a fever, 24 hours prior to returning, you do not have a fever, you would be allowed to return on the 11th day after your symptoms first surfaced. The other thing is a close contact. So anybody that's a close contact of a positive case or lives with somebody that's in a positive case in their home, you are required to home isolate for 10 days after the last exposure. So that's a little tricky. So let's say mom got COVID on Monday, and then dad got diagnosed, and you would say, okay, 10 days after mom's quarantine, after mom's illness and her symptoms pass, 10 days from there is when a child could return back to school. But let's say in the middle of that, their brother tested positive for COVID 5 days later. Then what would happen is that it would start over And 10 days after the day that the child was first tested for COVID, 10 days from there, the child would then be, that would be the end of that person's quarantine, and then 10 days after that. So it gets super tricky. It could be if you yourself get it, you get to come back after 10 days and you're 24-hour fever free, you get to come back. But if you are living with somebody in close contacts and you are not able to isolate from them, it is 10 days from your last exposure in your household from the person that was infected after their quarantine ends. Does that make sense? It's a little bit tricky. So close contact also it means that you could end up missing a lot more work as well as a lot more school, but that is one of the mitigating practices, because what it is we want to make sure that you do not come back to school when you could be becoming ill as your body is getting sick. And then the other thing is a positive case. If you were tested positive, you would have to quarantine for 10 days, knowing that your symptoms if you became symptomatic, that your symptoms have decreased and you were fever-free for 24 hours, on the 11th day, you would be able to return back to school or work. So those were some of the information that I know that the community was looking for, that we actually have a plan and what happens. And these guidances are all clearly stated. They're not just our county guidance, but they're the state guidances. So we are required to follow these guidances currently under the current California Department of Public Health guidances. And along with that, we also have to report our instances to public health. The next slide is talking about volunteers. We know that our community is full of helpers, and we are, as we move into the orange tier, we would like to be able to bring some of our helpers back to campus. So we will be looking, schools will be looking at a limited number of volunteers to support our schools. One of the things that we are going to ask is that they support our schools on the outside. So not inside our classrooms, but outside our classrooms. Maybe they're helping us with monitoring, bringing kids onto campus. Maybe they're helping us mark up our campus because we've used chalk to draw arrows and they've kind of washed away. What we're trying to do is keep our volunteers out of classrooms where they could cause exposure to a small cohort, because we need to reduce that ability. And the other thing that we will require, and we're really excited about being able to allow some people back on campus to get in that. But with that, we are going to acquire a few things. We're going to ask that all of our volunteers be trained by our nursing staff. So we will be providing training. Our nurses are putting together slideshows as well as video recordings. So we'll be providing training. We will ask them to participate in regular COVID-19 testing, so provide negative test results so that we know that we are not exposing our children to the virus. We will ask them to also complete a symptom check prior to being allowed to sign in and get a volunteer badge. That they must remain 6 feet social distance at all times from our students or any staff member. And we're going to ask that they also comply with the regular CUSD volunteer protocols, which in our place is a volunteer form that they generally fill out, TB clearance, as well as fingerprint clearance. So those are the processes that we will be putting in place, but we're excited to know that we are going to start letting our parents back on campus to help us out. I will turn it over to
Stacy. Great. So this last piece, as we alluded in when we talked about what our expectations of sharing today, we know that there is that conversation out there and planning for the fall, and families are making decisions as we're going forward. At this point, when people are asking what we can guarantee, our planning is for the full day, 5 days of instruction per week, a regular return to the fall. We will also recognize that some families may still want to do a distance learning. And so we will create a separate distance learning option for families that could opt to go into a distance learning for the entire year. We'll actually begin the registration for that process in the next couple of weeks, because that will require teachers that we would assign specifically for the distance learning that will pull away from our regular campuses. So we'll need to do our staffing accordingly. And then we'll continue to offer our home study program as an alternative program. This was our year that we we actually doubled the program. Haven't seen an overwhelming number of families that have taken advantage of it, but still it's a very strong program and very proud of the program. I think it's really important because the big question that we're hearing is, can you guarantee that we're going to open in the fall in person 5 days a week? Our guarantee is based on what the guidelines are at this point. There is a requirement of 6 foot social distancing. If that 6 foot social distancing were to remain in the fall, we would not be able to open and offer the 5 days. We also know that within even the last 12 hours, there's been a lot of conversation about the 6 foot requirement, and can that go down to 4 feet, or could that go down to 3 feet, or could it disappear by the time we come back in the fall? So all of our planning is that it's going to be a return to the 5 days, full hours each day. And we will continue to monitor. We know, again, as Leslie shared, our trajectory right now is to go into the orange here fairly soon this month, beginning of April, and are really seeing that positive change in our environment with the vaccinations availability, and are really looking that that plan can come to fruition in the fall, and we will return in person. Next slide. So we recognize we shared a lot of information with you all tonight, and really there's 2 focus areas that we really want to ask you to wrap your heads around and consider is this notion of sameness. Allison talked a lot about our guidelines, our consistency, but also our flexibility, and I think that was illustrated when we showed how we are coming to our AB models, how we are addressing leaves of absences that are spread across the entire district, how we have the complex numbers when we're looking at particular sites that may have a low number of in-person students coming back versus a site that may have a high number. And so standard in-person hybrid will be to offer 2 days a week for the 5 hours a day. But we also would like to explore, is there a possibility to allow some flexibility in that it wouldn't be consistent across the entire district, and allow the schools that have that opportunity that they could possibly expand to the 4 days a week, looking at our students that are our higher need students, maybe prioritizing them to come back the 4 days, and then continuing to expand as we're able to allow other families to come back the 4 days a week. One of the areas that I think would be important is that we are consistent across grade levels, so that we wouldn't have 2 classes in 2nd grade and one is 2 days a week and one is 4 days a week. Given this flexibility, I know that our sites can be pretty creative in how they can work towards that. But that really is our recommendation versus allowing complete flexibility and everybody is different. I do believe there needs to be some consistency, but I think we also need to allow some flexibility for these last 6 to 8 weeks of school, because really one of the big goals is to try to get our students back to in person, but also to still provide that high quality education for our students that are in distance learning. The other place that asked for some flexibility, some feedback on, we had presented a 2-week transition period, the April 5th prior to spring break, and then the week after spring break. We know that, again, our sites are at very different areas as they're planning with their staff for their AB models. Some have much more planning to do because they have a larger group of students coming back in person. Some will be ready to expand to the 5 hours when they come back from spring break. Others may need a little additional time. And one of the components of that is with our staffing. We do have some of the staff, as Leslie mentioned, that may need to be out the week of April the 5th through the 9th. We will be creative. It could require subs. I think all of us on executive cabinet are ready to sub that week. And so some of those schools may need to utilize that 2nd week after spring break to really bring students in to go through all the safety protocols. And again, others will be ready to go April 19th to expand. So we just would like to have that flexibility for sites to make that decision. The other 2 pieces that aren't on here as far as flexibility is we heard very clearly from board members and from our community and parents when we first presented the initial transition period of having the small blocks of 75 minutes up to 2.5 hours. And I think the first feedback we received was that 75 minutes seemed very low. So we've already adjusted that. We've had our sites go back and work to expand and not be at the 75 minutes, to be more towards the 2 to 2.5 hours. So that piece is already being taken care of and addressed at our sites. And then the other is that originally we talked about this April 5th date and as the target date, but what would happen if we shifted into orange? With our numbers not dropping as significantly as we had hoped with the county this last week, that we are still in the red tier, to look forward to when we would shift into orange. It really does coincide very closely to the April 5th. And just the feeling to make another major shift probably would be more disruptive. We would still be facing some of the complexities of trying to cover for our teachers that were out. So really felt firmly on holding to the April 5th date as well as our starting. So again, these two areas, if we could ask you as a board to really focus on and have a discussion on, and where do we want to go? I know it seems like we're saying two things when we say consistency and flexibility, but I think that's the definition of COVID living right now. So with that, I am going to stop and I'll turn it back over to you, Terry.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Stacy, Carrie, Leslie, and Allison. This is, I think, one of the most high-density presentations we've had in a while. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into this the last 2 weeks. Before we go into clarifying questions by the board, just want to remind members of the public, if you would like to comment on this item, to please fill out a card. We're not going to be taking speaker cards after the questions begin. And for my board members, I like to suggest if it's all right with everyone, that we follow the protocol that we did for this item last week or the last meeting, and just one round of clarifying questions, of 2 questions. Then we go to the public comments and we can come back for the rest of the questions, if that's okay with everyone. If so, does anybody like to start with their questions?
Yeah, I can start, Jerry.
Okay, thank you, Satish. Please go ahead.
Okay. Stacy and team, really a lot of work, as Jerry said, quite a lot of information, and thank you for doing this big work. But I have really few question, kind of suggestion or things like that on this. Okay. So specifically A-B model, right? So like if you take TK to 3, our class size is 24. Okay. And our capacity is 14 per classroom. And majority of our schools, like even if you take less than 50%, that means it's about 12 kids. Okay, so 14 is our capacity. We are not going to have more than 14, at least with the data what we have here. Why do we need an A and B? Why can't we have a single group and make all 4 days?
So in some places we do have that. So when we're showing a number, and I'll use Faria as an example, because I stick in my mind as having the 29% of the families that indicated the in-person. It can be different throughout the entire campus. You could have one of the first grade classes that wanted 20 of their students come back in person, and the other classroom only has 10 students that want to come back in person. And so creatively, we still have 30 students that want to be back in person. It's a large group to split into one. It can't remain in one because of the 6-foot distancing. It would have to split into 2. So there's no consistency across the entire district. Every school site is different. So when we gave our overall numbers of the percentage that are in person, they don't fit into those nice, neat packages across the grade levels at each of the campus. Again, we could have one class that only has 6 students that want to come back to in person, and 2 of their other grade level colleagues have, 16 or 17 that want to come back to in person. And sites are looking at how to be creative, and is there a willingness to shift some of the students to other teachers? I know that was one of our board priorities, that we really wanted to keep students with their teachers if at all possible. But we also know there's some flexibility there as well. And if it's the decision to get students back into person, we want to be flexible. So it really does just come down to the numbers. There are some that could go 4 days a week. The groups are small enough, they could just have a group A, but then there are many others that would have to be the AB model. So that really is, how flexible do we want to be? How inconsistent do we want to be? We know equity is important. We also know that trying to get our students back to in person is important.
Yeah, but I think in the same, just one more minute on this, Jerry. So basically, I think wherever possible, and as you said, exactly being creative, right? I think we should see that, like whether we can avoid this A and B, wherever possible, means like try to have more time in campus. It could be even moving around some, kids between the classrooms. So instead of having then 2 days, we can have 4 days, right? That's what very important, right? So I understand that the dilemma what you have, but at the same time, we should look into all possible ways if we can increase that into 4 days, right? The second question I have is again the timing. I think as I think the last you said about the 75 minutes to 2.5 hours, I think that is still a concern. Okay, so why it is still 2.5 hours, right? I understand that we are using that like kind of a orientation or a transition time, and definitely which we are looking now is like reducing, even probably later we'll talk about even having 1 week instead of 2 weeks, which we will talk, I think, or somebody else would be asking that anyway. So why we are sticking to this smaller time? Because what is it holding us? Why can't it be? What is it different from other, expanded weeks?
Right. So the reason for the transition really is, again, because it is an entirely new teaching and learning model for our staff and our students. And so that week really would be acclimating the students back onto the campus, going through the safety protocols. Our teachers will be learning how to do the concurrent teaching. They're on a fast track to learn that in the next 4 weeks. And so, in fairness to them, to acclimate and get themselves set up, what is that going to look like? That 1 week time is really important to them. Again, some will be ready to go when we come back from spring breaks, and some may need a little bit longer, but it really is, just that adjustment into a new type of teaching that they've never done before.
Yeah, I strongly think 2.5 hours is still too less. Okay, and we should see that we can probably, in my second round, I can talk, okay, in more detail, but I don't want to hold others' time, but I think we should look into that because there's no much change we have done from last week on that last meeting. Okay, thank you, Jerry. Then I'll wait for my turn again.
All right. Thank you, Satish. Who would like to go next? Any volunteers? Thank you, Sylvia. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I can go. So first of all, this presentation just shows just how deep the amount of work that needs to go in all these different departments. And so thank you to the staff and team for the work. I know it's not just been the last couple of weeks, but months really of planning and collaborating with all the different folks involved. I had a question about spacing in the campuses. I know we talked about spacing in the classrooms being that 6 foot. I'm wondering about like the additional spaces like GLCs, the MP rooms, gyms, those kinds of things. Are we able to use that? Are we using that? And does that then create more opportunity for more students to come in? Like what's going on there?
Yeah, so absolutely, each of the sites are being very creative in looking whatever their open spaces are, some of those larger areas. Some of them have already are planning on relocating their classes to spread them out to give them more space so that they could fit larger numbers. Some of those difficult positions are when you have 15 students that want to come back to in person and you just can't fit that 15th person in a regular size classroom. But if you move that classroom to one of the larger spaces, could you fit in more? So the staff really are looking at all those options, and every space would be utilized.
And then I guess my follow-up for that is we had talked or the staff had presented 2 weeks ago about the learning centers, potential learning centers for the off days. How would that work with spacing? Like, yeah.
So we did have a great discussion last week and looked at some of those options. One of the limitations would be space. Some of our campuses have more space available, that classrooms are empty, that we could offer that. Some are very limited, but we also are working with our cities to see if we can form a partnership and utilize some of the city spaces if there's families that would be willing to utilize a library or one of the other areas that the city could partner with us and allow our families to have a designated space on that area. The other piece that we looked at the same time is if we're going to go through the work of offering these learning centers where we would have to have them staffed, if we're going to look in that route, we might be better off looking at, instead of utilizing the space and the resources, could we use those to actually do the instruction there and expand our staff? It's all going to come down, I think, to the resources of finding available staff that could supervise these areas, but we're exploring both right now. So I think that's important when we're asking for the board feedback on the flexibility. Our intent is to continue to try to explore to get students to 4 days a week as much as possible.
All right. Jerry, can that count as a and a B for my first question?
Sure. That's fine. Go ahead.
My second question is for Carrie, I guess, with the safety protocols. Thanks for all of those details. I had a question about this. So if a student becomes symptomatic, there was all this protocol about sending them home, and it seems like then the rest of the class still stays on campus. is there a point at which we shut it down and say everybody needs to go home? Like,
So in the elementary school, that was exactly. So in an elementary school, we are required if a child got sick and got tested, came back with a positive test. So we sent a child home. They went and got COVID tested. They report back now that the child is a positive case. Those kids would then be considered close contact in the elementary school. Even though there'll be 6 feet social distance, it's a little bit shifty because it's a little bit different for elementary than it would be for middle school. So they would be considered close contacts, and we would then have to have all the children in that class self-quarantine for 10 days.
I see.
So
And-
that classroom would have to be shut down and moved to DL completely if the teacher was healthy, if it wasn't the teacher and the teacher was healthy enough to continue teaching from home. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. And then for middle school then?
For middle school, because I guess because they're older and they're able to keep that 6 feet social distancing, it's not considered they're not considered a close contact. Now, if you might take into consideration where that child sits and have the kids that are surrounding them, because they were getting in close contact. So you'd have to kind of be aware of that. But for the most case, because we're requiring 6 feet social distancing at all time, the middle school does not require that same kind of home isolation when it comes to close contact. The goal is, the fear for everybody is, oh my gosh, somebody's sick, now it's me. And I guess we know that, we've shut down and everything shut down based on fear, but there's a lot of science that's come from there since, right? So there's been a lot of research studies about kids and shifting classes and middle school kids and and shifting. And so the idea there is that they will be able to, because they're generally together like 50-minute periods, right? An hour. They're not there for 5 hours in one single classroom. So it's different in the middle schools.
Okay. And that they are not considered close contact. That's not, is that our standard or is that the state standard? Is that
That's state standard.
State standard. Okay, thank you.
As long as we can keep 6 feet social distance at all times. Does that make sense?
Thanks.
Mhm.
Thanks, Sylvia. Let's see, and Phyllis, please go ahead.
So I just have a comment really and a question. And the comment is on slide 8, you talk about no later than April 26th. So that concerns me a little bit, and I would like you to encourage the schools to really, really work toward that April 19th date instead of pushing it out to April 26th. I understand that there are a lot of conditions about that, and I know you guys have worked really, really hard on this. I mean, this is a huge puzzle, but I would like to see those schedules finalized earlier than later. So that's a comment, not a question. And then the other question is about the AB schedule, which, by the way, I support the AB schedule. I think until we're ready for all schools to go to 4 days a week, we need to stick with an AB schedule so that we have, me and consistency. I'm real big on consistency. But I was wondering, are the schools going to be AABB, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or ABAB, or are they choosing how to, or is each school figuring that out for themselves?
So that is one of the areas of flexibility for the schools to determine whether they're doing an AB or an AABB model.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jerry.
All right, thanks, Phyllis. And then Lori, would you like to go next?
Sure. Okay, so let's see. I think I'll go to, sorry, I missed my slide numbers. I got to scroll back down here. Well, the fall reopening one, so I guess it's 19. So I know there's so much we don't know right now, right? And the largest thing we don't know is the thing we need most, which is what is California Department of Public Health going to do with the current spacing requirements? And so while I totally get why we don't have anything concrete more to share than what we share here, I'm wondering if you could talk maybe just a little bit, Stacy, about at a high level, without speculating too much, if the requirements were to go down to a spacing more like 4 feet, or maybe even the European standard, the 1 meter, what would likely our lower grade, our upper grade, and our middle school, what's your initial thinking around what those might look like? And or if we had no social distancing spacing required by the California or County Department of Public Health, what would that mean?
So if there's any of the restriction on the social distancing, estimate if we were to go down to the 4 feet, it would add about 3 to 4 more additional students that we could fit in the classroom versus where we are right now with the 6 foot. So not a tremendous amount. 3 feet, you would probably add another additional 1 to 2. So not to the size that we would need for our full size classrooms where we're staffed at currently. And so we would really have to look at the possibility of hiring additional staff so that we could have smaller class sizes. Some of the sites would be easier to do that because of spacing availability. Some we would run out of location. Then we would have to look at possibly an AB model that's an afternoon or an afternoon morning, or an AB model that's designated days throughout the week, a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 1 week, or on and off week. So all of those hybrid options would have to be looked at specifically. I think it's important for everyone to realize we don't have control over the 6 foot social distancing. That is coming from the CDPH. We know that many other states do not have that 6 foot social distancing. We know that there is a lot of conversation, and I appreciate, I receive articles almost daily of some of the research that's being done, and I understand that. I appreciate it, but until we are actually given that ability to reduce the 6 feet, that is where one of our biggest obstacles is, and actually probably our only obstacle moving forward at this point.
And okay, so I just want to repeat back, and then I have a little bit of just a quick follow-up on this one. So what I'm hearing you say is we must comply right now with the 6 foot mandatory California Department of Health spacing. We are allowed to look at 4 feet only if we've exhausted all other options first, and that includes hybriding as one of the things we must do before we're allowed to go down to 4 feet. If they were to waive that and we were at like a 4 foot or maybe even a 3 foot, it might add 3 or 4 additional spots on average in our classrooms, and maybe an additional, I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, 1 to 2, 2 to 3.
Yeah, 5 to 6.
Went down to 3. But that means where our lower grade classrooms, if I'm doing the head math on that, we might get close. Our upper grade classrooms, maybe not as much, and middle school would maybe some, but electives and some of our larger PE classes and things like that, maybe not. So there's a big puzzle to work there, I guess, is the recap. And we can't give more concrete details until we get guidance from the state.
Correct. I think the one difference for the fall, as we're planning for the fall versus where we are now in the midst of all of this planning, is for the fall, we are already planning to have that separate distance learning program. So we know we'll be pulling whatever portion of parents are interested in the distance learning. Those students will be pulled from their home schools. We'll have staff assigned to them, which may require us to hire additional staff, but that's okay. We have the grant money. It'll be, finding the staff, which we're already trying to search for at this point. So there is a little bit more flexibility in that we could possibly keep our classes at a smaller size if needed.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that clarification around that. And I guess then my follow-up to that, just because we know it's been a big question out there, is if we're in a situation where with our break falling where it does, our spring break falling where it does, with I don't want to get the dates wrong, but essentially the second week we're back in person is when our spring break falls. And so there's been a lot of question out there in the community about whether or not we have expectations around families who are choosing to come back in person, around sort of the guidance that's still very much in place for non-essential travel, and then also around, I guess, the I'll just give you my follow-up to that, which is going to be, we're setting this date of April 30th for the final day for shifts. But I know I hear from a lot of families that are worried about whether or not they would like to come back in person, but they'd also like to wait until after sort of that 10-day after spring break to let some of the shakeout happen from, you know, if there are families, you know, who are coming back who, you know, have traveled and things during break. So can you talk a little bit to that piece?
And I'm not sure what the question was in that, so I'm going to.
Sorry. So, let me rephrase. Thank you.
Sorry.
So, non-essential. Do we have expectations around non-essential travel over break? And then also, how does that align with the no more shifts after April 30th if there's families that want to wait to come back for that? I think it's like May 3rd, whatever that Monday is.
Correct. Got it. So right now, many of the travel restrictions have been lifted through the guidelines. So again, we'll comply with them as well. Families always have the option, you know, if their child is sick or not feeling well, we would encourage them to stay home for, you know, the symptom checks. I think the important piece, the message still coming out is we still all need to be cautious. We all still need to wear our face masks. We all still need to be social distancing. And so I think that's important for that we shouldn't all be letting down our guard just because we are in red, potentially shifting into orange. And so our message to our families would be to be cautious, not do non-essential traveling if at all possible. I would, as we've had this question posed to us, that families that are interested in coming back to in-person, I really encourage them to have them make that indication now, because if they do wait longer into April, we may not be able to accommodate the larger numbers of coming back to in-person. Again, spacing wise, once we filled up the classroom into an A-B model and there's no additional spaces, we can't guarantee them a space spot back. So I really do encourage the families to indicate now that they want to come back to in-person. They would obviously, if they've started in person and they have a choice, they have a concern about the safety. If they choose then to remain home, that would be an option that they have.
So is that good, Lori?
I think you're muted, Lori.
Yeah, sorry, I was nodding. Yeah, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And thanks. My first question would have been the fall reopening one, but I think you worked it over much thoroughly than I would have. So thank you for that. In fact, I'm down to my number 5 questions with my colleagues are so thorough here. I guess my first one here, Stacey, going back to the AB, AABB, you know, you showed a slide that showed the percentages of the choices at each school. I was wondering at this point, do we know what percentage of classrooms would not be able to support just a cohort A model that they've gone over this 14 or whatever the limit is? So I'm trying to get a sense, just is it like 20%, 50%? It's probably not 50% given this, but do we know roughly how many classrooms or how many classes we're talking about?
Well, I think with the information that Allison and Leslie shared, parents have been making their indications over these last couple of days, and so it really has shifted. And so the sites are working at those numbers right now. So I couldn't give you a very precise answer at this point because they have shifted over the last couple of days.
Okay, all right. So so not a precise one, but would you say, is it like a quarter, a third, or it's fine if you're not, if we don't have that, I don't need a precise one, but I think this would help me actually in the decision making or some of the recommendations in some of the things you're asking about. So I'm trying to get a sense of this sort of A versus AB, what would that look like? But it's just really hard to say right now then.
I will gather that before you come back for discussion.
Wow. Okay. All right. I can see now people are working to do this. All right. My second question is, we've heard from a number of teachers that talked about sort of really wanting the community and the parents to be aware of the classroom protocols that would be there once we return to in-person learning. I think there are references to facing the same direction and being able to walk around. And I was wondering if you could say just a little bit about that, just because it wasn't directly covered here. And what kind of experiences can parents expect that their children would have once we start phase 3 and they're back in person? So is that Carrie? I see you've unmuted. So
Carrie.
Okay, great.
So if you remember the picture I shared with you guys during the phase 2, where the kids are sitting in their own individual seats, assigned seats, it'll very much look like that. We are not allowed to break the social distancing, right? So kids will be sitting at desks. They will have, or they might be sitting actually on the ground with clipboards and lapboards, right? So depending on, every classroom's kind of set up a little bit different. Some teachers like to do more flexible seating where the kids are on the ground and they're able to teach to them at this level. Some teachers use their formal seating. The ability to walk around is really not there.
Okay.
Because we don't have enough space in our rooms to put like to put desks 6 feet apart and to create like a 6-foot walkway, right? We would have to then have 12 feet away, does that make sense? So the ability to actually move about the room and kind of walk around the room isn't likely to happen, as well as kids have to be assigned seats, because if you had student A sitting at a seat and then student B wanted to go where student A was sitting at that desk, we would have to clean that area. So that idea where we bring all of our kids to the carpet and we teach them and then we send them back to their desks, really they're going to be learning from their tabletops,
Okay.
or their assigned spaces or locations.
So then in middle school, when they go to different classes, if they go to different classes, these cohorts, then is the first thing they do when they sit down, clean their desks? Or
so actually the last thing will happen for the group in front of them, they will wipe down their desks. Then they will do mitigation hand hygiene, and then they will exit. Does that make sense? So the new student will come into a fresh seat.
Okay, and just a part C on this question, since
Yeah.
it's related. In your presentation, you talked about the students will be asked to wash their hands on entering and exiting and all that. And I was wondering, is ask a euphemism for required? Because one is optional, the other is mandatory. I'm just wondering, for some of these transitions, do they have to wash it, or is it just sort of like they're
currently our classroom protocols require it. So upon entering and exiting, required hand washing, because we know that the 3 biggest mitigations are washing hands, right? Wear a mask and watch your social distancing. So those are the 3 things that we will be enforcing in every classroom, out on the yard, everywhere on campus, right? So that's the key. And right now it's 6 feet until we get any further guidance that is actually in writing from California, despite the science that says elsewise. Right now in California, we are limited to that 6 feet.
Okay, great. Thank you. So those are my 2 questions. So maybe we can move on to public comments and then come back for additional rounds of questions. Leslie, how many speakers do we have queued up here?
Hold on one second. I just did another peek. It looks like we have 26.
26. Okay, so I'm good with 2 minutes. Just kind of keep it within the hour, if that's all right with my board members. And let's go ahead then. Let's invite them up, Leslie.
Great. So I will read 3 at a time. If you would please raise your hand when your name is called. If you would please not raise your hand if I have not called your name, that would be great. It makes it easier for our communication analyst to find you. Our first speaker is Simi. Our second speaker is Ido. Our third speaker is Jenny Rojas.
Jenny Rojas. All right. Okay, and let's see. I see Ido's hand. Maybe we could have Ido go first. Oh wait, there's Simi. Okay, so all right, Simi, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Great. Thank you for letting me speak. So first of all, I just want to say we're very excited for the upcoming opening, and I want to thank the board members that have shown that they're excited today. I just really, a big thanks for supporting those kids that want to come back. I do want to talk about something that you keep bringing up here, and I've heard this word a lot throughout the evening, which is flexibility. And for a year, we've been in this situation, and in recent months, we've all seen the data that shows it's safe to reopen schools. And for months, we've been hearing that you say you're going to open an orange tier. We're on the path for that in March. And while you as adults might find it disruptive to change the date from April 5th, I think to a child, 2 to 3 weeks more of distance learning is just sad. And so, you keep saying be flexible. I think that also applies to your solutions that you're putting forward. And as far as the 2-week transition, at this point, we are all able to pivot as needed and as quickly as needed. And I think kids are the most flexible of all. They've had no vote in the school closures, but they're the ones who have suffered the most. And I think they're ready to come back, and they don't need 2 weeks to transition. And then I do want to encourage this board to provide a little bit more clarity on what's going to happen in the fall, and how and what out of the box thinking are you doing now to make sure that come August, we're kicking off the school year fully in person, as opposed to fumbling in the dark. And you keep saying the goal is to meet and seek public health requirements. This is not a performance review. We just need you to meet the guidelines that are given by the experts. Adding guidelines on top of that has just created a lot of.
Thank you, Simi. All right, our next speaker is Ito. So please go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Again, for the first time in, I think, 10 board sessions, I'm going to throw away the words that I had prepared ahead of time. And I just want to thank you. I think you are making a huge step in the right direction. And today, the plan is clearer. I agree. It's not always clear enough, not always coherent enough, but it is definitely much better than what we used to be getting. And the questions that you all board members are asking are finally so relevant and and pushing in the right direction. So thank you for that. I just want to encourage you to continue and do that. I do have a few questions. One would be around orange tier, as mentioned before. I totally agree. We should be opening ahead of April 5th, and I think it should be fine. Just make an effort. Another question is around Wednesdays. Why do we still not learn on Wednesdays, or just get a 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute session and then off we go? What happened? Why can we just not resume that as things used to be pre-COVID? I'm simply finding it very hard to wrap my head around that. And then lastly, fall. I hope we will not have the 6 feet requirement by fall, but if we do, it is now the time to come up with a plan on how you're going to handle that and allow 5 days, full days for everyone that wants to, like you keep saying. Build tents, do what gyms do what restaurants did, do what, I don't know, come up with other plans, but just let us know, because we need to know whether or not to pull our kids out of the public system and move them somewhere else. And we do not want to do that. Trust me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ito. And then Ginny, I believe, is the next speaker. So please go ahead when you're ready. Oh, wait. Is Ginny up?
I do not see. There we go. Jenny.
Oh, Jenny. Okay, great. All right. Thanks. Well, please go ahead, Jenny.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. I just want to second what the parent said, the parent who just talked. There's so many if and there's so much uncertainty in your words. I have to recognize, though, that today you have presented a more cohesive plan, however, full of ifs and doubts. And it's not really giving us, or at least to me, it's not giving us a certainty of what is going to happen in the future. And as the previous parent commented, we really need to know what are your plans, really, because I don't want to stay in the district knowing that my daughter might spend another year of uncertainty. I was part of another meeting with another parent from another school district. And when you mention mental health and mental problems that some of our children are having, they are telling you to go and look and seek for psychological help. I think you have in your hands the answer. You could remedy what is happening at the moment, and you should try to get the kids to go full time at school. I think you clinging to the the things that you can't do. Before it was the uncertainty, the numbers, then the red tier, the orange tier. Now it's 6 feet. 6 feet. We need to move before 6 feet. But if you could think out of the box, you have gyms, you have, we're going into almost summertime. We could work outside. Physical education is, to me, I feel like if I allow my child to go back, it's going like another zombie, from Zoom to zombie. I really appreciate what you're trying to do, but please think about the kids going back full time in fall, and try to make it happen soon, because you are losing many children from our district. I am on the verge of making the radical decision of moving to another state because of what's happening currently. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Jenny. And Leslie, we're ready for our next 3 speakers.
Okay, so we've got Anat, we've got Liat, followed by Aiden. Anat, Liat, Aiden. I see Anat.
Yes, Anat, please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, I think I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay, welcome. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I really want to thank you for finally, after a year long of listening to board meetings, I've been hearing more of can-do attitude from most of you, instead of just showing all of us why we cannot do and what's still difficult and what is still unknown. So I appreciate that. Also, I just wanted to mention, I've been listening to what Kai Brown said at the beginning of the meeting. I'm a little disappointed that he didn't see it necessary to apologize for the comments on his last meeting. He mentioned that the district and the teachers and the families need to find a compromise. And respectfully, I disagree with this notion that that's a process that should be viewed as a negotiation between equal parties. I think that we should follow the science and not what this family or that teacher believes. It's not up to what someone believes or thinks, but it's up to the science. We should follow the science, and we should put our kids and our health, our physical, emotional, mental health at the top priority. So the science says that distance learning is harmful to children, and the science said that we can open schools safely now. So scientists have been saying it for a long time, and I still don't agree with the delay until April 5th. I think we should open right now or sooner than that. I would urge you to push for an earlier reopening than this date. Again, I don't understand why we need to bring kids even for 2 hours a day on the days that we do bring them. I want to +1 what people before me commented, that kids can handle this transition at this point. All of us can be very flexible.
Thank you, Anat. And then Liat, I believe, is the next speaker. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, Jerry. Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to Satish that today you stepped up for us and you asked the right questions, and I really, really appreciate that. I have a few questions. I'll do it quickly. First of all, it's the Wednesdays. I want to know when my kids will have back their Wednesdays, because usually kids go to school and study for 5 days and not 4. The second one is about the fall. My son is in private school right now, and I need to know if I need to transfer my 2 older to a private too, or you're gonna open the fall, and you'll make the plans and the decisions before, and not in August. I'll have to be in another board meeting and to understand that we are still in the hybrid. So it's very, very important. And the last thing, it's about the plexiglass. You know, I feel that, you know, what Carrie just said, I feel that I'm sending my son to kind of, to be a fish in the class. I don't agree with that. I feel it's too much. And if teachers scared, they can put a plexiglass on their desk, but I really don't understand why my kids need to sit all day like that. So that's it. And really thank you, Satish and Jerry, for everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. And then Adana, I believe, is the next speaker. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, am I audible? Yes.
Yes, so we can hear you. Welcome.
Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, I wanted to say that, yeah, I think it was said for quite a while now that we were going to be, that the school was going to reopen when we were going to be in orange tier. And, here we are going to be in orange tier maybe by the end of March is estimate. And yet it's probably going to take, seems like it's going to take about 2 more weeks for the school to reopen when this was anticipated. So, there was plenty of time for this to be planned. And this is not rocket science. I mean, many other schools have done it. Other schools in this area have already been opened. So, this shows a little bit of a lack of preparation. I understand there's a lot of moving parts, but there was plenty of time to plan this. And I also am anticipating that as the urgency for opening schools is becoming more obvious because of other effects of the learning gap and mental health issues that is causing to our children, it's very likely that these guidelines are going to be restricted further. We're probably not going to have these 6 feet distance requirements because they're just a little bit too onerous and they make reopening more difficult. So I am hoping that the district has a clear plan to open the schools to full-time schedule when these restrictions are finally lifted. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adon. And Leslie, our next 3 speakers, please.
We have Linda Zhang, followed by Diana, followed by Avital. Linda, Diana, Avital. And once again, if we did not call your name, if you would put down your hand, thank you. Avital? So while we're waiting for the others, we'll move to Avital. There we go.
Yes, please go ahead, Avital, when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. And I'd like to echo what the other parents have said so far. I am really excited to hear that some positive steps are being done in the right direction. The previous board meetings that I've attended have been very discouraging. We have been waiting long to hear these words of actual plans to reopen. Earlier today, I attended the principal hour at CMS, and it was it nearly brought tears to my eyes listening to actual plans of actually bringing kids to the classrooms, and my kids can't wait. I hear of some students thriving in distant learning. I've never met them. It has not happened in my house. It has not happened with all the other parents that I speak to. All I see is failure and devastation. My son is able to get an F even in PE. I really want to urge the board to push for more hours, more days, be creative. We don't need orientation. My kids are waiting to go back to school. It's really, really hard to see this. I mean, I have not quit my job to become a teacher for my kids, but even when I had 1 month when I was between jobs, I could not do it. I am not a teacher. There's a reason they go to college and it's a profession. I cannot, as a parent, do that. And even if I had the time, and I can't wait for them to really be able to go to school 5 days. And I urge you to be creative for the spring break, before spring, and also for next year. we need 5 full days. Thank you.
Thank you, Avital. And then Linda and Diana, don't see the hands here, Leslie. So
I do not either. So Linda Zhang, Diana. Okay, we're gonna go to the next 3 speakers. We have Janelle Wang, followed by Noah, followed by Andrew Cow.
okay, Noah, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you for letting me speak, and really thank you all for all your efforts. And we are really excited about the opening on April 5th. I'd like to start regarding the reopening in the fall. I know that there are a lot of questions to see what about guidelines and how they will change, but maybe you should also recognize that what about the lower grades, maybe start with this committing for the lower grades for TKK first to a full in-person no matter what. These are especially new students that are new to the campus. I think that's something that you can take into consideration. Secondly, about the transition orientation period, I think 2 hours is too little for our kids to understand what is expected of them for the entire day. So why do we start with an orientation of only 2 hours? They're already on campus. Keep them for the whole 5 hours so they can see how a day actually looks like, and not just 2 hours for them just to come in, wash their hands and sit down and then get up again and wash their hands again. Third, I want to say the fact that teacher requests are so low show us that the unions are not advocating for all teachers, just so that the teachers do want to come back to school. And I'm so happy to see that. And just one thing about what Carrie said about the walking in the classrooms. So according to CA guidelines, short-term exposures of less than 6 feet between students and staff are permitted. For example, a teacher assisting a student one-on-one, but duration should be minimized and masks must be worn. So teachers can walk around the classrooms. Don't make parents be terrified and that they won't have anyone approach them. Teachers can approach them. So just that just should be much more clearer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noah. And then I see Andrew's hand up, so maybe we can have Andrew speak next. And Andrew, please go ahead when you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me talk. First of all, I want to echo the other speakers. I really appreciate the board and the superintendent and everyone who's worked really hard to put together this plan. I've been attending the board meeting far more than I thought I ever would. And it's very obvious that the board and the superintendent and the schools are kind of taking our feedback and really trying to reopen the schools. And for that, I'm very appreciative. Like others, I prefer my kids are in school already, and so forth. I do have a few comments. The first is there is a variant, and I know CDC last week has warned about a possible third surge. I want to ensure that whatever plan we're putting in place will be carried out, and we have that we don't shut down school again, basically. That's my first point. Same thing with the fall. I have a kid who's 4th grade, another kid who's in 7th grade. I want to guarantee that the school will be open. And I think we have sufficient time and maybe plan with an assumption of 4-foot distance or 3-foot distance, right? And then what can we do to at least ensure the school will be open, even with that kind of distancing, since that seems to be the distancing that we've seen in other parts of the world. And it's possible that that requirement will still be in place. I'm all for outdoors, holding the classes outdoors. I mean, let's be creative here. The last thing is I would like to just express, reflect some of the comments other people have said and felt. I really would like the teachers union to be much more of a partner in reopening schools. Sometimes it does feel like the teachers, the union doesn't seem to recognize that it is us, the parents, the taxpayers who are paying the teacher salary, and we are their customer. So please work with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. And I don't see Janelle here, so maybe we bring up the next 3 speakers.
Absolutely. So we have Purvi Shah, followed by Sonia Patel, followed by Ivan. And please know if I did not call your name, if you would please put your hand down. So it looks like we have Purvi.
All right, Purvi, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay, so I am going to start this by quoting a poem from one of our youngest poets here. For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. So, board, I want to thank you guys today because we are finally seeing the hope and the step in the right direction that we've been really wanting to see. And we can see you guys have listened to the community. You guys have heard us and you're representing our views. Jerry, Satish, rest of the board members, we really appreciate that. It's not perfect, but it's with purpose. And we are hoping that we would continue refining and expanding the hours that we are offering for our children. I am not going to repeat. I think a lot of these points that I wanted to make are already made. So the two things that I want to really understand is, why is Wednesday still kind of considered an asynchronous day and we are not utilizing that? Maybe, group A can be 3 and group B could be 2 days, 1 week, and then reverse that in the next week. That could expand. That could be a creative idea to expand. And the last question I have is, we have a teachers training day this Wednesday. This Monday. Why can it not be on Wednesday and asynchronous days, so that we are not sacrificing synchronous day hours? I think we talk about flexibility. I think these are all the flexible options. We don't need to stick to what is defined. In times like this, we need to be creative and minimize the impact on the kids rather than sticking to what the schedule was set at the start of the year. That's all I have. Again, thank you very much. I think this is moving in a really good direction.
Thank you, Purvi. And then let's see, I don't see Sonia here, so maybe we could have Yvonne go next. So Yvonne, please start when you're ready.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks everybody for letting me speak tonight. I would like to extend my thanks to Stacy and other presenters from the district for the detailed and data-driven presentation tonight. And a special thank you to all the board members for very good questions. I think that you preempted a lot of questions from the public tonight. It's really great to see this new dynamic in the board meetings. Hopefully we'll make this the new normal. Echoing some of the questions that the previous speakers have asked already, I wanted to double down on the fall and the new school year. I see in the presentation that we're still considering distance learning as an option. My understanding was that there is still no waiver from California to actually allow distance learning as an option in the entire state. So I hope that the board or Stacy maybe can comment more on that. I'd also like to ask a question about what's going on with the commitment for the full in-person new school year. We have already lost 2,200 kids this year. And as a result, we lost the funding for these kids as well as an LCFF district. If the message that the parents hear now is that the next school year is still up in the air, and that it's an impossible puzzle to solve, I'm afraid that the trend of losing students will continue, and the district will lose even more funding going forward. I really hope that the board will be able to provide a very clear guidance to the district and set a very clear expectations that we need to have more creativity around finding solutions. Even if there will be still social distancing requirements in the fall, we need to be able to figure out how to increase the number of teachers, how to spend the money from the COVID relief funds that the California governor has granted to the district, and what other solutions can be employed in order to make it a really good school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. And I see Sonia here now. So Sonia, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, thank you, Jerry. So I wanted to thank the board for today really advocating for our kids. And I really felt that some of the questions asked, especially by Satish, were very good and very advocating for our kids. And I want to know if perhaps the hours could be increased also in some way or other, like the previous speaker mentioned, maybe on Wednesdays, which would be nice, instead of just going for 2 days, 4 hours. The other thing I was wondering about it is if they can go for more than 4 hours. I have a middle schooler, and why is it only 4 hours? And I'm wondering about that. The other thing is about the fall. The fall, I think we need to know before the end of this school year what the plan is, because that is very important. And if maybe we can just assume the worst case scenario and say it's going to be 6 feet, but please, even if it's a 6 feet requirement in the fall, please, let's just plan to have a full reopening somehow. I think things are getting much better with COVID. I don't think we're going to be at that stage in the fall. I mean, things are getting much, much better, but people are getting vaccinated and COVID cases are going down. But we need to plan so that we don't get stuck in a hybrid mode in the fall. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Okay, Leslie, our next set of speakers, please.
We've got June, Ni, N-I, Sharada, followed by Uma Jayaraman. If you would raise your hand, June, Sharada.
All right, June, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay, yeah, thank you. First, I want to echo all the speakers and thank you so much for the board and school to work really hard to be open now. And I just want to, and also want to thank Satish for really speaking up for the parents, for the kids. I really appreciate that. And one thing that I guess so I'm the one who composed a survey with a bunch of other parents, and with the 1100 response that we got from the parents, more than 80% of them are requesting the school to reopen full in person and in fall. So we have 5 months until the school starts in August. So what I'm really looking for is a solid plan, a communication from the board to us, to the parents, basically to tell us what's the plan, because we have 5 months to work on the infrastructure, to work on the staffing, to really work around the 6 feet requirement that we may need to follow. So I think that that clarification to the parents are really, really important, because a lot of parents are already leaving the district, and that's really sad for the kids and also for the district. So I really want my kids to stay in the district because I love the teachers and love the school. So please let us know. And another thing is about even about the transition period that we have right now. I think the Wednesday that's left open is always like to me, the Wednesday for the kids is really just they're doing whatever they want right now. So they're not learning. The effective learning is only 4 days. And what can we do to improve that till the end of the school year? And thank you so much.
Thank you, Kim. I believe Sharada is next. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. I would first like to thank all of you for all the work you put in, because when I read your report, it's an enormous amount of work that you guys have put in. Thank you so much for that. And I have a middle schooler and a special needs kid who's attending an SDC class. And this last year has been so tough for her. We've seen her anxiety come back. Her levels of anxiety are crazy. And then some of her behaviors that we have worked on for years since kindergarten, they've all come up again. And it's so tough for her when compared to my other kid who's a typical kid. This kid has gone through hell the last year. And she can't wait to get back to school and see her friends and teachers. So my question is, what will the typical week look for a middle schooler STC who's attending STC class? So how many hours of in-person teaching what can we expect? And how many days of week will she attend the school? And I'm hoping it's going to be an AM/PM model where she can at least come in to school for 4 days a week. So she has that structure, even if it's for a few hours if she has the same structure every day, it would really help her. And I can't wait to hear back from you. And thanks again for all the hard work that you put in.
Thank you, Sharada. And then Uma is our next speaker. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thank all the board members and the superintendent. There was quite a detailed plan, and there's definitely a progress from what was presented in the previous board meeting. So a couple of questions I'm just going to repeat for other parents have already expressed. One is the start date. So I don't know what is the logic of, why are we so stuck up on this April 5th date? I mean, we are already in red tier and we are 3 weeks away. So my biggest concern is all businesses are opening up, and what is your plan? I mean, we are waiting for the April 5th, and what happens? I mean, you're estimating that the cases are still going down. What if the tier rolls back? I mean, that we don't want to be in a situation where we're not able to open even for hybrid, right? Because I know as per county rules, once you're open, you can remain open irrespective of what the tier has been. I mean, tier goes back to, right? Whether it goes back to purple tier. And I mean, other districts are opening up next week. Mountain View is opening up next week, and there are a lot of other districts planning. So what is with the April 5th date? I presume by now all the teachers should have already got the first dose of the vaccine, right? I mean, that gives a good amount of protection already. And I mean, why can't we start looking into at least opening up the lower grades, right? Like kindergarten to second grade, like the end of March. I mean, there's no reason to wait, right? Why are we so stuck about opening all grades together at the same time? Like, can we please consider, kindergarten to second grade opening up, like, the next 2 weeks or so, and then April 5th for the other grades. That's my biggest concern. And of course, like other parents, I would like to have a good plan for fall to know, we're definitely going to be opening 5 days a week. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma. And then our next speaker is Leslie.
Okay, we have Elizabeth, followed by Rupa, followed by Yu Ying. And if you have your hand up and you believe that I missed your name or called your name and your name on the screen comes up differently, Pam will put my email address in the chat. You can email me and we'll try to reconcile before the end of the meeting. Elizabeth, Rupa, and then we have Yu Ying.
All right, Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Thank you, Board and Executive Committee, for giving me the time to speak. I'm very happy schools are starting to reopen for those who need it. My family had been struggling over the decision about if we should send our child back to middle school or not. We knew that the main factor was if our community was making good decisions. Then we saw the photos and videos from last Friday's Reopen Our Schools rally. There was no social distancing. There were children not wearing masks. People were mingling with more than 2 other families. And there were 2 board members there, Jerry and Satish, the 2 men who had said at their board office hours that they equally support in-person learners and distance learners. The parents, students, and board members at the rally are the people that we are all supposed to trust to do the right thing so our children can be safe at school. Their behavior at the rally was proof that they don't value safety as much as I do. By attending the rally, Jerry and Satish showed they don't understand the importance of the public health officer's mandatory order, mandatory meaning required. I have no confidence that they understand or will enforce the safety measures needed to keep CUSD children and staff safe, nor do I think they will work to ensure that distance learners are receiving the same quality of education the in-person learners will get. By the way, I'd say that of any board member who attended a large gathering and didn't socially distance, because it means I can't trust your judgment. My child wants nothing more than to be at school and see his friends and teachers. However, some members of the CUSD parent community and school board made it clear that getting their students in the classroom is more important than keeping the community as a whole safe. So I ask of everyone, whether your student is going back to campus or not, please do the right thing. Follow the required health protocols and use common sense. We all need to make good decisions so all of our students can return to school safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And then Rupa is our next speaker. So please go ahead when you're ready, Rupa.
Hello, thank you for allowing me this time.
I had prepared to talk about fall in a very serious way. I really want to understand what the plans are to make sure that the in-person learning in fall is as normal as it can be. And I'm still not able to get that information from what I heard today. The reason I'm kind of torn between pressing more on the fall plans is that my daughter had written this letter for me to read out in the board meeting today. And I do want to read it out. She's a fifth grader. And I think this is very important for everybody to hear and understand. I'm very sad that she has learned this much over the past 1 year of distance learning, the problems of distance learning. She says that there's a lot of science behind the problem of distance learning, but sometimes adults can underestimate how it can affect children, especially the kids whose brains are ready to take in things that are happening around them, but they're not old or experienced enough to stop them from getting distracted with other going on in their other goings on in their devices. Slowly and gradually they get addicted, can't do their schoolwork, choosing whatever they're addicted to over playing outside or reading. And if parents don't know how to stop them, they cannot do anything else but that. These side things on computer are designed to attract kids' minds. And if they are tired, then that's all they can do. So what she's suggesting is that there is more to the problems from distance learning than what we are all talking about. And I really press on you guys to make sure that the fall is as much in person as possible. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Rupa. And then I don't see our third speaker here, right, Leslie?
No, let me read it again. So that was Yu Ying. And then we also, I'll go with the next ones. We have Joshua Moss, followed by Santosh. And our last speaker that submitted a card before we began public comment is Tara.
Okay. All right, and I see Joshua here. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, so my comment is addressed both to the unions and the board. So you guys have a problem and you guys don't know how deep you're in. You have lost the equivalent this year in 88 of 4 elementary schools. That's 2,200 kids, 2,200 families that are not going to be voting for Measure A. Right now, what we need to be doing is enticing those kids back. Those kids who are there every day at private school with their friends, getting settled, settling in. Every day that goes by that we're not bringing those kids means fewer kids are coming back next year. That means more teacher layoffs down the road. That means less chance of passing Measure A down the road. We need to be focused on how we can entice those families back. And if we do not come out and put a stake in the ground and say that we are going to reopen in full next year, 100% in person, we're going to lose another 15%. And remember, we're looking right now, based on our average ADA of a loss, excluding the loss of Measure A funds, we're looking at a loss of about $15 million a year, right? So the question right now is, how many teachers can we save from layoffs by bringing our students back sooner? Because right now, a lot of parents are making that decision. If the board doesn't come back and tell me, put a stake in the ground that says we're reopening, then they're going to pull their kids. I hear this over and over everywhere I go, everybody I talk to online from where I work. Dozens of parents are telling me that they're going to pull their kids unless they get some certainty from the board. So to the board, I ask you, if you cannot reopen the schools in full next fall, will you commit to resign from the board? Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. And then Santosh, I think, is the next speaker, and I see him here. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. So I want to disagree a bit with the rest of the parents that spoke today. All of them had lavish words of praise for all of you. I just want to ask, some of you probably work in the corporate world. Some of you may be managers. You manage people. You probably write performance reviews. I ask you, if you had to write a performance review for yourselves, in the corporate world, what would you give yourselves a performance review of? Look into your own performance and grade yourselves, at least for those that have a day job in the corporate world. The vast majority of those that are dealing with the situation have no guarantees. We have a job as long as we perform. And we expect and trust that you will perform so that our kids can look up to you all as role models and be able to go into school and have an education. Right now, there are schools that are operating 30 minutes a day. This is not a reopening topic. I want to bring back the topic of hours of instruction. Regardless of whether you're operating in distance mode or hybrid mode, it is unacceptable that a school runs for 30 minutes a day. And I ask you, what are you doing to hold accountable the principal of the schools that are operating for 30 minutes a day? And why we're running for 4 days a week? Is Wednesday a day off? I missed the press release that we have moved to a 4-day week model. None of us have a 4-day week model. Many of us work 7 days a week. So I ask you, what performance grading would you give yourselves? And I hope you will hold yourself to the same standard that your day jobs expect of all of you in the private corporate world that you may be in. Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. And there she is, Tara. All right, Tara, you're our last speaker, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. Today, I wanted to voice my support for the board trustees. I felt it was important to let you know that you're not alone. Public service is often a thankless task, and when you show up for the legally required public feedback, which can take hours, and all you hear is how everything you are doing is wrong, it must be disheartening. There are so many stakeholders in our district, and if we took just a Project Cornerstone minute to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and consider everything that was said at the board meeting 2 weeks ago, there is validity in everyone's position. We would then recognize that it is impossible to meet everyone's expectations. Many don't understand the work of a board trustee, the day-to-day execution by the administration, nor the state and legal mandates that a public school must comply with. I understand that you don't represent my child or someone else's child, but the 15,000 children in our district, as well as the teachers, staff, and parents. It's not that you don't want schools to reopen, but it's hard, and you're trying to manage many different dynamics that you don't control. Students of business know that in negotiations, you work to achieve a win-win scenario, and the result of this is compromise and no one gets everything that they want. There was no pandemic playbook that was handed to you, and I know that you're trying to find solutions. Today, I speak on behalf of parents who are not the most vocal in the community, but they are the ones who sign up to volunteer in schools with children other than our own and chair committees. I have personally called parents this week, and I want you to know that while we understand this reopening plan won't please everyone, we trust you to make good decisions. There are many unknowns. I want to thank the board for the countless hours that you put in and let you know that we see the personal time taken away from your families, jobs, and vacations. You didn't suddenly change today. You are doing what you have always done. We will stand with you against this recall effort. Our district has seen far too much turnover. We are with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. And then Leslie, just want to check, are there any other speakers that we've missed here?
No, and I just want to remind the public that we begin taking public comment throughout the meeting. Yet when we start public comment on an item, if comments are submitted after our public speakers have begun, those are collected and they are shared with the board, but we do our timing based on the number that we receive before our board president opens up the item.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Leslie. So I'm gonna close public comments at this point and bring us back to the board. And Stacy, you said you might have some numbers, so I thought I'd check in to see if they're there. And you know, we've actually picked up a few. We picked up a few questions. I think there's some themes that came up, and if you wanted to talk about them, that's fine. Otherwise, we can do them during the deliberations. So maybe I'll throw the baton over your way to see if you have anything to share at this point before we go to
Great.
questions.
Thank you. And so I do preface this with saying that we're still gathering the data that's come in these last couple of days, which we know has altered, shifted to distance learning and to the in-person. When we last ran the numbers, we had a significant number of classes that were over the 14 mark, approximately 400 classes throughout the district. So a rather large number to still look at trying to accommodate how we would shift those around. Again, we know that number shifted, that's an approximate number, and we can certainly bring back the information at the next time with more precise numbers.
Terrific, thank you.
And if you would indulge me, I know there were several questions about next year and the planning for next year. And one that I specifically was the question about the distance learning and our ability to offer the distance learning, which is certainly something we can. Many of our surrounding districts are going to do something similar. We have had a few districts that have already started that. So we would do it as a separate school or an alternative school or aligned with one of our other schools, but it does allow us to offer that distance learning program. There is nothing that prohibits us from that with any of the legislature out there. So I wanted to clear that up. The other questions surrounding the return to fall, and again, I think I hear over and over again that the guarantee, but I also understand that 6 foot distancing is sitting out there. Certainly understand if we go down to a 3 feet, we would have a plan ready to go. We didn't bring it forward tonight because our emphasis really tonight was talking about the reopening in phase 3, and we'll certainly continue to bring back the information for the reopening in the fall.
Great. Thanks.
And then I think if I may, I think the other concerning questions and comments that we heard that I really would like to clarify is this notion that we've lost over 2,000 students this year. And I'm not sure where that number is generated from. We have our projected declining enrollment, which we had prior to COVID, and have continued to look at what those projections are as our staffing are. As we're looking at enrollment currently, we have lost some families have come in and disenrolled, but not at a significant number that is different from other years. So I'm not sure where that number comes from the 2,000. So we're not seeing this mass flight out of our district over this year due to COVID. We're seeing our already projected declining enrollment numbers coming to fruition.
Great, thank you, Stacy. And then let's maybe go around with questions. And I know we only did one round before, so we could do a round of questions and then share comments or whatever if you folks feel like. So I didn't write down the order. I think Satish, I think you went first, right?
Yeah, I was the first person. Okay, so we'll go with the questions now, right? So we're not going to make the comments, right, Jerry?
Whichever you like, yeah.
No,
We'll just kind of go
okay,
around.
so we'll go for I'll ask a question then first before making my final comments. So any reason for the slide number 8 and the dates like this April 30th, right? And we are starting April 5th. We have a plan for 5, you know, like 5 to 19, then after that till 26, and we are waiting for till 30th of April for the final shift. What is the thing behind that? Because I thought that if we can put an earlier cutoff, that will be much more easier for us to plan, and this would all help us to have more in-person time, my view. Because you are giving again more flexible, more you are making like, you know, still waiting for some more data, and that makes again the program one more, you know, it can jeopardize. So I really do not get why we are waiting till April 30th unless you have something specific behind that.
No, that's one of the areas that we do have the flexibility. We really just established the date to allow families as much time as possible to make a choice. You know, our goal is to be able to accommodate all families as they want to shift to in-person and didn't want to set it too early of a date. If we do shift it to an earlier date, I would still want to have that allowance. If there was space available, could we still accommodate families? We do recognize that by the time we get into May, we do want to minimize that disruption and would want to limit families not being able to continue that choice. But if we wanted to move it up to April, prior to April 30th, that's certainly within reason to do as well.
Yeah, no, I think my thing is that, like, you know, we can keep it as, like, as you said, like that's great. Actually, we are keeping a little bit more for if at all any opportunity for them to put, you know, change it, but that's good. But at the same time, I do not want to have that planning till April 30th. If we can get this data kind of cut off much earlier, that is going to help us our in-person timing, right, in terms of days or the duration. I would prefer that over keeping till April 30th. April 30th could be the best effort if there are positions.
And we'll always have that caveat there that it would be as space is available. So even prior to April 30th, some of our AB models may fill up and we wouldn't have space available. But again, we can certainly shift that date.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, Jerry, I'll wait for my second question one more round. So because I did not prepare immediately. Yeah.
Sure, that's fine. I think I reconstructed the rotation here. I think Sylvia was next, right?
Yeah, so my question has to do with kind of testing and assessments for the rest of the year. I'm wondering what that's going to look like, if they will look different for the DL learners versus the in-person learners. You know, my concern is going to be equity, parity of the populations, making sure that, you know, one doesn't get either more or less advantage in terms of, you know, assessments, especially I'm thinking about at the middle school level, where there is more of that, you know, testing, quizzes and things like that. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Allison to step in because she's done so much work on considering that consistency and equity across the board.
So in terms of the middle school, one of the things we're considering is possibly doing the CASP testing on Wednesday.
That's me that I can't hear, or is it? Is it Allison's screen?
Allison, your volume's cut out. We can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You're back.
Okay, that was weird. Okay, so middle schools are considering doing the CASP testing on Wednesdays. That's one of the things that they're talking about now, what would make sense in terms of doing that at a time when students are all in distance learning. In terms of classroom assessments, that's really something at the teacher level that would be addressed. But I know that our teachers are very focused on making sure that we keep that equity in mind between distance learning and in-person students. And many of the platforms that we use now will still be used during this new part of our journey. So for example, we use our iReady tools in middle school for English language arts and math. Those are online tools, and whether you're in person or at home, you would have access to that. So we will keep that in mind, but I think the short answer is all the kids would have the same assessments, and we'll be sure that when it's a district or state assessment, we have protocols in place and teachers will take on that responsibility for classroom assessments.
Right. Then my other question has to do with the more social activities, student activities, like, for example, 8th grade graduation or clubs and things like that. If a student has chosen to stay in distance learning, does that preclude them from any on-campus activities, or is there going to be allowability to have those on-campus activities and celebrations and socializations, even if you've chosen distance learning for your kind of day-to-day?
We would absolutely want to still have all students be eligible and have that opportunity to experience graduation. Probably comes to mind first. Absolutely, just because the selection of distance learning would not preclude them from doing any of the other activities.
Okay, and it doesn't change, because I know with the stable cohort, I think I'm thinking specifically about clubs and things like that. That might be a little bit more regular than like a bigger event like graduation.
It would be really looking at how to maintain those stable cohorts. We know that students can be in more than one cohort. They could be in multiple cohorts, multiple stable cohorts. So we'd really take a look at that, but want to optimize as many opportunities as possible.
Okay. And then is there any news on sports at all? I know like there was some announcements for like high school sports. I don't know if that's come down to the middle school level at all.
It is, and we've actually have our staff looking at is there some, we're not hearing a lot of interest from our surrounding districts to start up with their middle school sports, but we may internally, so we're just really taking a look at that. Prioritizing first getting us back into in-person, and then we'll explore with the sports.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. And I think Phyllis was next.
Yeah, I have a question and a request. So my question is actually for Carrie. On slide 16, Carrie, you talked about a self-symptom check. Can you kind of tell us what that means? How does that work?
So the process during this time frame is a self-symptom check. So families will be asked to do a self-symptom check, meaning making sure that all their kids do not have any COVID symptoms before they bring them to school. And staff would also have to make sure that they're aware of the list and that if they have any symptoms, they don't come to school. You know, in normal times, right? My kid has a headache. I give them Tylenol, I send them to school. Or I, as a teacher, have a headache, I take some Tylenol and I go to school. We're really avoiding those things because if they're COVID symptoms, the idea is if you have a symptom, we ask that you stay home and make sure that you're okay, get tested, etc., so that we know that you are doing whatever your part in keeping the COVID numbers down, the possibility of spread. You know, so a lot of times you're right. It's really difficult out there right now because COVID symptoms and the common cold are the same, right? So what this is, and this with the state, it's a state requirement that everybody do a self-symptom check before coming to work, before coming on site onto our campuses. So that's from staff to students to parent volunteers.
Great, thank you. And my request actually is for you, Jerry. I would like, as you organize the rest of this topic, that we limit to questions for the next however many rounds we need. And then the last round would be that each of us would respond to the 2 questions that are asked of us on slide 20. And the reason I say that is because I think it's really important that we as a board give clear direction to the staff. So, I mean, we're getting pretty close to April 5th. And I think we need to give them really clear direction. And I'm not sure we're all going to agree on what that direction is, but be that as it may, I think we all need to say what our positions are on those 2 items. So that's my request and I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Phyllis. That's a good idea. And so I'm actually up for, unless there are additional rounds, maybe we do just this round of questions. And then if there are others who can pick it up, but we should, I do want to do at least one round of deliberations since I'm back and forth addressing these 2. I'll be very specific about where we are on this. So I concur, Phyllis. It's a good suggestion. Thank you. With that then, Lori, 2 questions?
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'll follow along with Phyllis on safety since I have certainly received quite a few emails there. So Carrie, are we doing any sort of documenting of that self-symptom check? Like I know some districts are using an app that parents need to fill out. I know others have a form that they're supposed to email in. I mean,
so
I think we all
are doing that, but the idea is there's no way of like if you try to track that, it would be require like the state has put in guidelines that we don't need to track that because the ability to track that and to get your kids on campus is a daunting task, right? Because then you have to make sure that you have a form per kid that walks through the door. So the state has actually lifted those guidelines and basically says a self-symptom check at home by both staff and families. The other thing that we are doing though is we talked about and we're working towards a community contract, community agreements. So agreements that we're asking our families to acknowledge the fact, just like we did in phase 2, that there are some things that we are asking you to do on a daily basis and how we're going to conduct ourselves so that we can continue to keep our community safe. And the symptom check is part of that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to get that contract out there sooner rather than later, because I think that is something I hear a lot about from families is the concern around, I mean, I think we all as parents know if you know, and I'm sure you guys do too, as staff and teachers, probably even more so that, you know, I mean, I can't tell you how many times as a volunteer over the years that there were kiddos in the class who definitely had symptoms that they should not have been on campus with.
So Lori, we were just about to send the community contract when things started shifting again. And so before we send it out, we want to make sure it has the latest guidances on it. So we are in the final, like the very final edits of it.
Yeah, no, I saw that guidance was potentially shifting there again too. So thank you for that. And I appreciate that. Yeah, so that would be great. And then I'll just stay on safety for this round. The other one that I get a fair number of questions around, so we talk about notification for close contacts. And obviously if we're just looking at our classrooms, or, you know, knowing that our classrooms are then also going to be our lunch table groups and things like that, it's fairly easy to define. Less easy to define when we're talking about multiple kids could be sent to the restroom at the same time if they ask, or if we're not cohorting, you know, only 7th graders using the bathroom in B wing at the middle school or something. So do we have, I know that sounds like a silly question, but I have been asked it with some amount of frequency, which is why I bring it up here. So do we have, is that part of our plan? Maybe you can address that.
Schools are being asked to make sure that they develop procedures for their restrooms. And so it might be that if you have 3 toilets that are sitting next to each other, it might be closing that middle toilet so that you are keeping that 6 feet social distance. So the idea, you have to remember, close contacts is 15 minutes. So you would have to be in the bathroom. Both of you would have to be in the bathroom for 15 minutes side by side. You know what I'm saying? Within that 6 feet. Same thing in boys' restrooms. Let's say if they have multiple urinals, we would probably close off one of the urinals so that it creates that social distancing. Same thing, the distancing tapes would be put on the floor in the bathroom so that, you know, there's one kid at this sink. We might close that middle sink and we would have the other sink open. Does that make sense? And then the same thing, teaching kids. So part of the onboarding process for kids would be teaching them, hello, is there anybody in there? No? Okay, now I can enter. Otherwise I wait on the dot outside the bathroom, right? So in some schools, depending on the size of their bathroom, they might be able to fit 2 children in the bathroom, but at some schools it might be only 1 child, right? So based on the various restrooms at school sites and what, you know, most schools have like a primary restroom and an upper grade restroom, or teachers will advise kids, these are the bathrooms we typically use. And so procedures are being put in place to mitigate that. But I think the bigger issue is close contacts is really 15 minutes. And typically children don't spend 15 minutes in 2 children don't spend 15 minutes in a restroom especially from all classrooms.
Just given some of the questions I've gotten, I can only imagine the questions you guys are getting, but I thank you for emphasizing the 15 minutes because that's the one I've been trying to re-emphasize.
And I think that's the part I think that causes the most unease. It's not about that you passed next to somebody or you were near somebody for a bit and you walked away. It's really, are you spending a considerable amount of time in close contact with somebody? And that's why we're really teaching kids, and we ask our community, hey, when you're, you know, make sure you're social distancing. They talk about like a grocery cart, 2 grocery carts between you. It's hard to give yourself visuals, right? 6 feet's difficult, but the reality is we will put mitigation strategies in place in restrooms and stuff like that for schools so that not all kids are using the sinks next to each other to avoid those close contacts.
Thank you for clarifying that for everyone. I appreciate it. Okay, I do have a couple more questions, Jerry, but I'm happy to wait if we're going to do another round.
Are we going to do another round? Could you see us maybe show of hands, folks who would like to have another round of questions? If not, then Lori, you can just go ahead and ask yours, I think.
Okay, I did just want to clarify. So on Allison's slide deck, part of the slide deck, there was a, oh, shoot, and I lost it. I'm sorry, I don't remember the slide. I think it's the one that's titled feedback. So I apologize for not having the number. But we talked about, and I know we've talked about it several different points about prioritizing support for our highest needs kiddos. And so I did just want to talk about, or maybe ask about, do we have sort of some specialized communication that are going out to those families And I know we have a town hall coming up, so sort of what we're putting in place to make sure that our special needs families have clear communication around what to expect and what their options are, and what specifically we're doing as we're working towards bringing all students back on campus.
Want me to address this?
Yes, thanks,
Oh,
Jennifer.
good. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you.
Hi, Lori. Yeah, so absolutely, we're going to make sure that we get some really clear communications out to all of our families of our students with special learning needs. We're looking forward to the town hall next week to be able to kind of go over the plan and take questions and make sure that everyone really understands what we're planning, how we're going to get services to our kids, because we do believe it's really important.
Thank you. And then my last one, maybe this is for Stacy, was just on the slide around volunteers. Can you talk to me a little bit about, so I understood what we're planning is utilizing volunteers not in the classrooms. And so can you talk to me a little bit about, I know we have some programs on some sites that really rely on in-classroom volunteers, and sort of how, or maybe if we're addressing those unique needs on some unique campuses?
So we really do want to initially start with limiting that number of volunteers. And so even some of our campuses that utilize a lot of our volunteers in the classroom, we are advising them to enter in slowly and cautiously and to utilize outdoors until we can continue to move into the orange. And some of those sites, their volunteers can do a lot of the work outdoors without having to go in the classroom. So we're being creative. We do have one particular site. I know that trying to work closely with the administration there as to how to increase and allow as many volunteers as possible, but still maintain these safety precautions. So this is one of those areas where we'll start slow. We have a great resource with our parent community, and we certainly want to take advantage of that. But we really want to get our teachers and our students back onto campus, and then we'll continue to evolve and expand on our volunteers.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for me, Jerry. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Lori. Let's see. So my questions, I think, will be around user experience, I guess. So I know some of the site admins have sent out some schedules to the community, or I guess to some teachers, and based on sort of these high-level guidelines that the district's provided. And I was just wondering if you could, I'm trying to understand a little better what the day in the life of elementary student or middle school student phase 3 will look like. Could you comment on, for instance, in elementary, it's 5 hours on campus. Does that mean we serve lunch and there's food service, or there isn't food service? For middle school, I'm curious about how long are the periods? Are there going to be breaks? I know it's site specific, but any sort of insight you can kind of, a picture you could paint to help us understand what a life of the students in this phase 3 will look like would be appreciated.
Sure. So we really did try to set up the hybrid schedules that they would mirror what's currently be done in our distance learning. So middle school, for example, when they come onto campus, they will be attending 3 periods. The time length of those periods would still be what they are doing in the distance learning. So they're approximately 65 minutes per day per period. And so that would continue in the distance learning. For the elementary school, again, we would try to mirror the same type of a schedule that's currently in place so that it doesn't disrupt our distance learning students. It allows them to the continuation. We are planning on providing lunch. It could be a grab and go if the end of the day is the last period of lunch, or it could be a sit down. Carrie's done an extensive amount of work in preparing, what a lunch could look like, how do students eat and then put their mask back on. So fully planning for the lunch. I know Nicole Meshi, our student nutrition director, is amazing, has been working all along and planning how can we get the lunches distributed out there in a safe way as well. So Allison, do you want to talk a little bit more specific about what the day looks like from the kids' eyes? Put her on the spot.
Sure. So with our elementary students, for the classes that are able to offer that AM/PM model for the TKK classes, if the students who are coming in person might come, as an example, 4 days a week in the morning, and then they would have their approximately 3 hours on campus. Some sites, as Stacy said, might include an eating time. We will have some break time scheduled for the kids. So Carrie's been supporting the sites and thinking about how to manage, whether it's a brunch or a snack or a recess, those types of parts of the day that we know are important for kids. And in TK and K, the kids who are in distance learning would have their instruction primarily at another time in the day. So that could be afternoon in this example. And there might be some time where the classes are meeting up together virtually so that the connection is continued between the students. Although in those grades, we'll have to see how the numbers look, but in the first round, we felt that would be achievable to do the 4 days a week for TK and K in person for those who want to come back. We have to see where we are with the numbers now in the next round of things. For the other elementary students, they would be coming twice a week or potentially more pending guidance in the next question here. And they would be beginning their day in that same structure of distance learning as we've been talking about, although it will look different. I want to emphasize that our teachers are in the process of preparing for a shift instructionally. There will be aspects that are the same in terms of the blocks within the schedule. Many of the methods that they're using in distance learning also will be applied in this hybrid model, but there will be shifts as well. They will be navigating students in the class and at home. And so the day will include, just like it does now, sometimes we're in a whole group meet, sometimes we're working in a small group, which could include students in the class and at home possibly. Sometimes it's offline time to work on an assignment that the teacher gives. And so there's some time that's together and sometimes that's more asynchronous throughout the day. So it is going to be a shift and we're in the process of making sure everybody's ready for that. And I just want to acknowledge that our teachers are really embracing this with excitement for having students back on campus and also an awareness of the adjustment that it will take to be sure that we're meeting that target of making sure that in-person and distance learning students have a positive experience. So they're thinking about how to use time creatively, what they will need to be able to accomplish that, and how to also maintain a focus on making sure students feel connected, whether they're in person or at home.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks. Thanks for that drill down. That really helps to, at least for me, to paint a sort of, I think, the magnitude of the kind of changes we're going to be seeing, because it's a really different instructional model. And so then my second question, I'll just maybe follow up on this, is in double clicking into what the classroom will look like once, and because I think when Satish and I did office hours last week, there were a number of questions around equity and how do we ensure that, ensure equity. And I was at I guess a session that Polly did for Fremont Union where that question came up, and she basically, I thought it was a good answer, right? She talked about, it's not going to be exact because there are different measures, but we'll do our best. And so some of the questions I have are, for instance, would we expect the students that come in person to bring a computer also? So they're also on Zoom. Would they be on Zoom? And, if not, then how does everybody see each other? And I remember, I think it was the last board meeting when we had talked about maybe we could put cameras or something. So I don't know if we're going to do anything like that. So we could comment a bit about, now that you've painted the picture of what the day's going to look like, what would it look like inside a classroom? Are the kids going to be bringing laptops like adults now, going to work in school, or how does that look?
So what I can do is kind of give a brief overview, and then I also will share with you in the weekend update some of the materials that we're using for training for teachers, so you can get a sense of what that looks like. And then we may need to follow up with more specifics because it's kind of a lengthy topic, but my kind of quick answer is that yes, our feedback from teachers is that students in all grades will need to have access to devices when they're at school. It doesn't mean that they will necessarily be online 100% of the time, but the teachers need that flexibility because they are utilizing technology in such an integrated way right now. They have to be able to manage students at home and at school. And so what they're sharing with students often has to include technology to make sure it's accessible for all. And then also for those connection points, if we want students to be working in a group together, that is that's the way that they will have to connect. So we're in the presentation materials with teachers talking about that, and Mahmood's team has been supporting it. There are different ways that we can accomplish that, and we're starting off with a standard set of materials, and then there are options that teachers can request. So for example, a webcam is not a required standard tool, but it will be an option for teachers who want to use it. So we can report back more in depth on this because there's quite a bit of detail around that topic.
No, I certainly understand that, and I would expect some diversity there too, as different folks have different ways of teaching. With that then, are we good with going into discussions, and maybe I think what we can do is reflect on what we've heard from staff and the public, and then to Phyllis's point, we really should be specific about the 2 items, along with any other comments people may have. So if we're good there then, Satish, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah. So let me start with what Phyllis said, right? Like, let me go to the board feedback slide first, and then I'll talk my opinion here. Then probably a couple of other comments. That's all I have, right? So the first one, right? So basically the flexibility part of it. Okay, as I have been telling that I think I prefer to have everybody coming all 4 days. Okay, that's what my preference over this. Okay, and especially, right, at least we should be the lower grade students. Like now, I think at least a very good slide you have put already, Stacy and team. That is, we have 24 for TK to 3rd grade. We have only 24 students per class. I think there is a good chance that we can get majority of them, like, all 4 days. This is what my view here. Again, probably I may be a little wrong, but I think that's what we should be striving for. Just see that I know that it could be an additional work for you, but I think let's see that whether we can bring them at least the lower, I want everybody, or I prefer everybody, or I wish everybody. But if there is anything, because especially with the 1:24 versus 1:33, 1:24 is much more easier for us to address, and I want that. Okay, that's what the number 1 is. Number 2 is the transition, the 2-week transition. Absolutely, I think I am. The recommendation is I think 2 weeks is too much from my end. Okay, and I think 1 week could be more than enough. And if we can really plan for that, and at least after the break, like if you can have the complete, like the hybrid can be brought in, that would definitely that schedule can be brought in. That will be really helpful. So in first week itself, if we can finish whatever needed, the orientation, the transitions, whatever it is, and with a significant increase in the time, the duration, right? Like 75 or 2.5 hours probably is not acceptable, or it looks very, very less. And if we can try something out beyond that, that will be great. Okay, these are the comment about these two. And I think I've covered most of the things, but I think a lot of things we heard about the fall part of it, right? So at some point of time, right, I think sooner, very soon, maybe in next board meeting or following, we need to have some detailed plan on fall, right? And from when you're planning this fall thing, like now let's look into the worst case scenario. I understand that 6 feet could be a challenge, but I think what we will do if it is still going to be 6 feet, if 6 feet is going to be mandatory, then are we still going to go with a hybrid model? We probably that will not help, right? So let's plan the worst case scenario and see what is needed. Is it like an additional classroom, additional subs, additional whatever it is, right? So let's understand that what is that missing part of it, and then we have 4 months time from now, so we should be able to address that with the help of everybody here. So we can come up with some creative ideas, I guess, like since we have definitely funding on this front, we can see that what additional things need to make fall, all 5 days. I think that should be the aim. And I understand that 4 feet, 3 feet, 6 feet, everything, the class capacity could change. But we should plan, or we will be planning based on the worst case scenario and to address all these constraints. So I would really be happy that if we can present a plan on that, a detailed plan, how we can get this, in spite of having the 6 foot, even if that, if that's going to be mandatory, but still to have everybody, to come all 5 days in a week. I think that's it. I think, Jerry, I think most of the things I think we have covered, especially the more in-person time, more days, okay, less orientation than fall. These are the 4 areas. And at the same time, I just wanted to add one more thing. Definitely, when we are talking a lot on, the people who's we have been focusing a lot on in-person, but it does not mean that the distance learners we are ignoring. And I wanted to make sure that whatever in-person people are getting, the same level of, coverage, the people opted for DL is also getting it. And it's not that we are just talking, or I'm talking just for the people who's coming in, it is for the entire community. And we have to make sure that DL is getting the equal opportunity as like how people in person is getting it. Let's not ignore that, irrespective of the percentage on both. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Satish.
Jerry, could I ask Satish just a little bit more clarification on the first bullet of the sameness? When you're referencing the younger grades of the K through 2, bringing them back to 4 days, are you okay with that being inconsistent across the district, that some sites are able to bring their K2s back for the 4 days, and if another site isn't, or are you wanting it to be across the district?
I think by looking at this from the very high level, I see that except 4 sites, every other site we should be able to bring it. At least this could be, I am reading it very high level, unless I know that specifically each of this grade. But I think out of our 20 schools, 20 elementary schools, if you take it, I think 16 schools have the capacity. It's my assessment again. I could be wrong, but have the capacity to bring out of at least the lower grade people pool.
Thank you.
And the other 4 schools, we have to see that how we can accommodate that. I don't know yet, because that is, even we have 76% in one of the schools. It's 76%, so that looks very high, and we have to see that how to work on that. But I think majority of the school have the capacity, in my view.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Satish. And I believe Silvio is next. So
yeah, this is a question that I have really been torn over, because on the one hand, we've talked about consistency. I've talked about consistency and equity forever, and wanting to make sure that we are able to have that consistency across the schools, across the campus, across the grades, across the classrooms. And I think it's hard when, even if, let's say, I think Stacy used the example of Faria being like, what, 25% or something like that. But then we don't know that that's an even 25% of each classroom, right? Like, because that could mean like one classroom has 20 kids that want to come in, and then another classroom has 3 kids. And I'm just trying to look at it and say, well, if my kid happens to be in the classroom that has the 20 kids, and then the classroom next door has the class with 3 kids, where's the fairness in that? And I think that's the challenge, right? And so where do we go on that? But then on the other hand, if your classroom only has 3 kids, why should we create additional barriers to having them, not be able to meet more often? And so it really is such a challenging issue to have to tackle. A couple things that factor into this for me is those learning hubs. And I know you didn't, include that in the presentation today, which was, tons of stuff, but I'd be interested in knowing how that can help with some of this consistency, even if it's not necessarily 4 days instruction with your classroom teacher, but if it's, like as you continue having those conversations with the city and creating, potential other locations for the B group or A group to be somewhere else, to still provide somewhat of that same kind of support system, I think that would be good. And so that does factor into what I'm thinking of as we're looking at moving forward. I do like your recommendation. I like the staff recommendation of starting with the consistency and then having the flexibility to change. I mean, this whole year has been a year of pivot and making things up as we go along, right? The entire school system for our entire nation has had to make up things as we go along. Jerry, you know, I listened to that same one because I think you and I, we both have kids at the high school district too. And Polly did say, you know, like, this is one of the biggest challenges is creating that same kind of parity across the district, across the schools, across each classroom, and making sure that every single student has what they need in order to get the education that we've, you know, promised. So I think I'm in favor of going with that recommendation. For the transition period, I had a chance to watch one of the training sessions for the teachers to go through, and I know that they're doing professional development, the amount of work that it's going to take for them who've, you know, had to basically convert their in-classroom lessons into these distance learning lessons and now have to recreate everything and, you know, learn this concurrent learning teaching model. So I appreciate that will take some time. I appreciate that there's a transition and a ramp up needed for that. I think there's a good natural break in that we're starting on the 5th, and then we have that 1 week of transition and ramp up and onboarding, and then moving into a spring break, right? Because I think there's going to be a lot of things that come out, kinks that come out in the system, and you know, faucets that are broken that need to get fixed, and you know, hand sanitizer stations that are whatever, right? Like, so spring break then gives us that opportunity to fix some of those things, and then to kick into that extended model the Monday following, you know, I think is a natural kind of restarting point. I know that, you know, like you said, some of the sites might have a little harder because they might have more kids. You know, some of our sites have 75% of our kids wanting to come back. And so there will be some challenges there, but I would strongly encourage I would like to see it just be that 1 week, but I understand that we need to have some flexibility there too.
Okay, Phyllis, Sylvia, and then, sorry, I got a little thrown out here. I think Phyllis is next, right?
Okay, so on the first question, I've said this before, I think everybody understands my position, but I'll say it again. I think we should do the AB 2-day hybrid schedule until every school can go to 4 days. I'm not supporting the some schools in one way and other schools in another way. I also support doing 4 days for K3 if we can do that faster than we can do 4-5. So whenever all the K3s in the district are ready to move to a 4-day schedule, I would support doing that, even if the 4-5s or the 6-8s couldn't. But I think we need to be consistent across the district, across grade levels, because otherwise I think we're going to have a huge uproar from those parents who feel like their children are not getting a fair shake. On the 2-week transition period, I think I'm agreeing with both Sylvia and Satish there that I would like to see them do the expanded April 19th rather than April 26th. Thank you, Jerry.
Oh, thank you, Phyllis. And then Lori, please go ahead.
Okay, so I will try and address a few things. I'm going to leave the 2 questions until last, Stacy, and go over a few other things that I just wanted to comment on. I know I had asked for an agenda item last meeting on our actual enrollment, but I think in light of hearing some of the comments related between reopening and some maybe perhaps misunderstanding in the community about what our enrollment situation is, I think it would really behoove us to get that on an agenda sooner rather than later. So I hope that that's forthcoming. I do just want to comment on that because people brought it up tonight, I think that the misunderstanding is the P2ADA number shown on the multi-year, which is actually a 2018-19 number that then carried over to 2019-20 that then became the holdover for this year, comparing it to next year's projected decline. So not even an actual number, but a projected number. So it's actually multiple years worth of loss, but it would be good if we could bring forward clarity on that as it relates to this discussion of in the bigger picture of reopening and Measure A and other things that continue to come up. Let's see, I did want to address the comments that came up around April 30th. I do think there are a number of families that I've heard from that continue to be interested in in-person learning, but are also struggling with the spring break and where it just happens to fall. So I would not be in favor of closing the window for families who choose to add in-person learning sooner, because I do think that that closes off some families who are considering in-person learning, but want that extra buffer after spring break before they look at returning their children to school. So I would not be in favor of moving up that April 30th date for that reason, just because I don't think I think it's an artifact of our schedule that where spring break falls, and it doesn't seem fair to close off that window for families that are trying to make safe choices, but also having their options and the ability to look at in person. Let's see, for the two main questions here, I do have to say that it would concern me that we would have, I like the staff recommendation in that, you know, I do think that having a standard where we're providing 2 days for everyone is a great place to start. Obviously, we hope we can expand that, but you know, I do think if we're going to prioritize that, having, you know, I've said all along since fall that I think, you know, if we do have to make decisions around prioritizing, that the right way to do that is starting with our highest needs students. I think we already have clearly established criteria that we then expanded from our phase 2 learning hubs. I hope we would apply those and use information coming from our site teams and our principals and our teachers around our students that have higher needs right now, and that if we have those extra spots for 4 days a week, that's where we would prioritize our resources. That said, I do want to learn more from staff in the coming weeks around just how many classrooms it is that we would be looking at. I heard the number 400 tonight. So it may be that my request here is impossible, but we do have some, not a lot compared to a lot of districts, but we do have some relief dollars. And so I guess I'd be curious to know what that number is. What is the dollar figure on what it would take to not overstaff the entire district, but maybe overstaff enough to get to those classrooms where could we get to that 4-day standard? And to your question earlier, Stacy, I agree that if we can only do it for some grades, then maybe if those lower grades are the low hanging fruit in terms of the numbers because of our classroom ratios, that might be a good place to look. Our TKK, our K13 range, but I'd like to know what those numbers are for our COVID relief dollars in terms of what it would cost to get to that 4-day standard. And I hope that when you bring that item, we can be mindful of not only what it would cost us for this spring, but also what it would cost us to keep that same standard next fall, if that's what's required, because I think that would help me think through how many dollars we'd use this year versus how many dollars we'd use next year and whether or not that would come out. So if you need more clarity from me there, please feel free to follow up. Okay, so then Moving on to the second one, the staff recommendation for encouraging the 1-week transition period for all sites. I said last meeting, I'd prefer that it's the 1 week for the 5th through the 12th, and then that we really hit the ground running on the 19th. I also want to acknowledge that staff may be aware of specific circumstances where something different is required, and I do think that that's part of why we rely on our staff to implement. And so you know, I do want to say that while I hope that our standard is that 1 week transition, if there are specific reasons for specific sites where the executive team really feels like there is a situation that warrants something a little bit different than our district standard starting on the 19th, then you know, I'm open to that, but I do hope that our standard and our expectation is starting the expanded on the 19th. And I think that's it for me. Otherwise, I will just say that I am really thankful for all of the work that went into getting us to here. I know that from the outside looking in, it doesn't always make sense to understand the logistics and the requirements that we are held to, and why our timeline has looked the way it is when other timelines you know, may have looked different. And I do think that speaks to the fact that every district is different. And I really thank our staff for getting our district and its unique challenges to this point. You know, I continue to believe that science is a tool, but it is not a prescription for policy. And the reason why it's not is because policy, science can't make a value judgment, and policy really is about value judgments and about trying to get us to the point where we can meet the needs of all of our students to ensure safety and learning moving forward. So I'm really excited that that's where we're at, that we are at this time where it's the right time for us to be making this next transition into this next phase. So that is it from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Very well said. All right, I'll share. I have a couple of reflections to share before getting to these questions. And so I'm listening to my colleagues with the different thoughts here. I find myself actually agreeing with many of the elements from everybody. And that kind of, you know, reminded me of, I think in some of the comments we've heard, you know, there's an undercurrent of well, maybe I won't talk about that, but I think I just want to reiterate that we're all here working together as a team to try to get the schools reopened so that we offer equitable choices for people, whatever they want to do. And we may have different approaches to it. We bring different values and perspectives. And I think that's what you actually want. You wouldn't want a board that all 5 people work in lockstep. And I think the fact that we bring different perspectives and it's a strength for this board. And I really just want to kind of reiterate that we're all here for the 15,000, 16,000, however many kids there are in the district. So I want to first say that. And then I wanted to talk a bit about the fall opening and maybe build on what Satish was saying, because I think I've talked to a lot of parents the last 2 weeks, and I think overwhelmingly that's the thing that comes up, right? And I understand the situation, which is we're really dependent to a large part, or maybe solely, on the CDPH recommendations and that whole 6 feet thing. But what I like to do, maybe this is what add on to what Satish is saying, is let's build some contingency plans on what if that happened. That is the case there, right? And that 6 feet is still there. What would it take for us to open? Right? Because I think one of the commenters talked about what would you do in your corporate job? And I think to myself, we release product plans years in advance, right? I can't go to a customer and say, well, I don't know, you know, if I get the LCD screen, then you can have this computer, and if I don't, then you don't. And I understand that. So I guess what I like to see is let's just think outside the box is an overused cliche, but let's just say that we're going to open no matter what, right? What would that take in terms of money? What are the other constraining factors? Is it the ability to get staff? Is it money? Is it, what would that look like if we wanted to somehow, if we needed to work around this 6 feet, this 6 feet thing? I think all indications are it shouldn't be there. But I actually that would be an ask for us to kind of work on that, would be one. The other thing I'm hearing from some parents is this sort of, I'm convinced that there are families out there, it's not the majority of the families, but ones where they really want their children to be back as soon as possible because they're suffering and through different circumstances. And I also understand that there are things we have to work through in April 5th, and I'm not looking to move that date because it upsets too many other things. And besides, I think it's important we stay true to our MOU. But I wonder if there are, and I don't know how many families there would be, I'm guessing a low number of hundreds. Are there sort of hubs or things, or it doesn't even have to be school, but something where they can, maybe things we can do with the city, right? I talked to, you know, the Cupertino Mayor Darcy Paul and I had a long chat over the last week about what the city can do, right? And some of the resources they might be able to bring just so that these families have some relief before we officially open school on April 5th. So that would be an ask also to see if we could look into something like that. Now, in terms of these two questions, I thought Sylvia described the conundrum really well. It's really a, what it comes down to is the sort of the equity versus what's the, I don't know what the other word, I guess flexibility is. And so I'm gonna, I think, build on, I think, a lot of what Lori said, which is I like to ask for 4 days a week for the students. Now, there are physical limitations, right? Because there's only, people want to stay with their teachers. The teacher can only be so many places and we can't clone them, right? But I wonder if, and I think this is what Lori was getting at, is there a middle ground where we offer them ability to come to campus for 4 days, and maybe 2 of the days they get their teacher in the normal AB rotation, and the other 2 days, if they're not with their teacher, is there a way for them to be at least at the school in some sort of a, I don't know, a study hall? In Lincoln, they used to call it homework club, but that's really like study hall, something like that, where they can be together, socially distanced. I don't know the logistics of what that will look like. So at least they're they're on campus with their friends, even if they can't be with their regular teachers. It's just a thought at a high level in terms of, can we kind of get to, so to kind of try to, I really like to get to that 4 days, but just working through that. We have some of the COVID money. It's not a, you know, a huge amount, but it's, I just like to see what, I think I'm maybe building on what Lori is saying. Let's look at what the possibilities are and can we do something here for that. But I think fundamentally, I would sort of want to do the 4 days. And I understand Phyllis's point about sort of having chaos if it's like all over the place. And so then if we weren't able to offer, for instance, on campus for everybody, could we at least do it in lockstep so that, I think what I think it was Phyllis or someone that said K-3, right? We could ban them. So could we at least bring all of K and 3 back and not maybe the entire grades? So just to kind of, so that it's not a step function. So just because we can't offer 4 days to everybody, could we do it for some folks, but do it in a way so that there's a meaningful cluster. And it seems like grade level might be one. There may be others, but I think that's what I would ask for. And then on the staff recommendation, I would agree with my colleagues that I like to see a 1 week transition. I like to see one where, you know how the state says it's got to be 6 feet, but if you want to do 4, you got to come explain why it's got to be 4 feet. I like to see perhaps a model like that, where it's got to be 1 week, but we're open. And if it needs to be 2 weeks, let's talk through why that is, as opposed to, so I guess it's a more stringent notion than just pick one kind of thing, that we have a preferred one. And then I have an idea to toss out, I'd love to hear from my colleagues here, is what if we just rather, so we designate that week as a transition week, understanding that that time is going to be spent on procedure and just kind of getting back in school. And I don't know, for like sixth graders, you know, what middle school's like and all that. But what if we made that the regular schedule? And the thinking here is, rather than making a transition to a 2-hour one and then another transition to a 4-hour one, logistically, why don't we just transition into a 4-hour one or 5 hours or whatever, but just understanding that that time is really going to be for transition, and so that the students have time with their peers and all that. And I don't know what I'd love to hear thoughts and what the logistical obstacles might be, but that's, I guess what I'm thinking is, yes, we should have a designated transition period, but maybe we just go to a regular schedule to begin with, rather than doing 2 jumps. So anyway, that's my first round of thoughts, but I'd love to hear comments, and maybe we could drop into discussion here if anybody would like to start. Or maybe Stacy, do you have guidance for us after hearing from the 5 of us on other specific areas you'd like us to double click on a bit more?
Well, I do appreciate it. I think clearly the direction on the transition is clear, that there's we'll shoot for the 1 week, and we do realize that there may be a few sites, and they would certainly want to work with us and share with us why they couldn't get to that 2nd week of expansion. So that's an easy one. What I think I'm hearing, and just to clarify, is that there is definitely an interest of keeping some consistency when we expand to the 4 days. And if we have to break it down into the lower grade levels, to do that first, that it doesn't necessarily have to be full school site, which with our K through 3, of course, those are smaller class sizes anyway. So the 24-to-1 would probably be much easier to get to the 4 days. So we'll explore that as well. And we're already on for the planning for the fall. So we will anxiously, and with a little cautious excitement, bring back some plans for the fall.
Okay, great. Anybody any other comments before we move on with this item?
I'll respond to your ask, Jerry.
Sure.
I mean, I think I guess my take would be, I go back to where I ended my comments earlier, which is, I think for me, our staff has clearly communicated to me that they feel like they need that transition period. So I would be reticent to try and push a week 1. But I think I was pretty clear on, I think a week kind of gets us there. And after that, I really think the expectation should be the full schedule from the return after break after. So that's just my personal sort of reflecting back to try and address what you asked, of us.
All right, thank you, Lori. Any other comments or thoughts on anything before we move on? Okay, seeing none then. Well, I haven't looked at this agenda in an hour and a half here. All right, so then that will close out item 7. So thank you to Stacy and your staff for this. Was a lot of work that went into it. There's a lot of progress as reflected by many of the speakers. So thank you. I think we're on a good track here. Yay. All right, so then section 8 then is 2 action items of items that we previously discussed. We're really just bringing it back by action. 8.1 is the approval of the 2nd interim. Is there a report or introduction of some sort, Stacy, or?
No, we're just bringing back, I don't know if Jeff wants to give a real brief overview, but it is what we brought last board meeting.
Sorry, I couldn't get on. We don't have anything to add to our last meeting, or from our last meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. In that case, then I'll entertain a motion. If anybody
I
will.
move that we accept.
Thank you, Phyllis. And a second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Satish. All right, then. If any other questions or discussions? If not, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion passes 5-0. I'm sorry, I should have checked. Were there public comments on this one?
Oh, I am sorry. I lost track also, so I'm glad you checked. Yes, we do have. Do you want to?
Yes, we definitely should.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Asaf. Asaf, if you would raise your hand. We have 1 public comment. My apologies.
Asaf, please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to speak. So I was just going over the approved plan again, and I was wondering, Lori, also Stacy mentioned the 2,000 figure wasn't really accurate. Now I recall in the State of the District presentation on October 8th of last year, that put the daily attendance number for 2020-2021 at 1576 at 15,763 students. So we're projecting about 1,700 less students. That's about 11% drop. So probably triple what we have in a regular year. And furthermore, the California Policy Lab research released last week showed that there was a 200% increase in the amount of people leaving the Santa Clara County. So I don't think 11% drop in enrollment is really unrealistic. And I really wanted to know if there are any contingency plans in regards to, like, school closure, staff cut downs, those kind of things, if we actually do see a drop in enrollment that amounts to those kind of percentages. Thank you.
Thank you, Assam. And again, apologies for sort of skipping this a little earlier. Thank you for your understanding. All right, is that the only comment we have?
Yes,
right?
that is the only comment.
All right. Any sort of, anybody would like to make any comments? I know Lori had asked for this to be brought up back for us to look at more in a future meeting. Should we just address that then, or? Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, and then closing out on 8.1, then moving on to 8.2. This is the ratification of the superintendent employment contract. Again, is there a staff introduction, or should we, if not, we can move on to action?
Yeah, I wanted to provide contract highlights for the board. I know that the contract is uploaded for you to look at, but I did want to highlight a couple things. The term of the contract is 3 years, commencing on July 1st, 2021, and extending through June 30th, 2024. Stacy's salary would be step A of the established salary schedule, with an annual yearly salary of $271,734,000 for the 2021-2022 school year. This salary reflects the same salary that she is currently receiving in the 2020-2021 year, as she has elected to not ask for an increase in salary for the next year due to the district's financial situation. In addition, the contract provides for a mobile device stipend and a monthly car allowance. These two items align with all other members of the executive cabinet and has remained consistent over the years. That is the information I wanted to highlight. And if you have any questions or comments, I will take them. Otherwise, we are asking for you to discuss or move on action on this contract.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from anyone on this? I did have a question, and so I don't know if this is in scope or not. So the contract starts on July 1st. And I guess right now Stacy's the interim superintendent. Is there any way we can just have her be like the superintendent and remove the interim title after we pass this, or is that complex? I sort of a slight preference, but I was just wondering if do we have any thoughts or comments on this? Leslie.
I'm going to defer to Stacy in regards to process on whether or not that has to be a separate action item at another meeting, or can that take place as part of this?
It would be a separate item because I currently do have a contract that calls me out as the interim. A simple solution can be I just take the interim off my signature on the emails and everything else, and and move forward.
Maybe we can discuss that. Sounds like that's a separate item. So thank you.
One question, I think, Jerry, that's a good point. Is that this contract can override that, right? Or cannot? What any reason why we cannot?
This contract is set to commence on July 1st, 2021, and it is because she is in a current contract for up until June 30th, 2021.
Yeah,
So
got
I
it.
think it would be simpler to move forward with this, and as Stacy said, removing the interim for the public face, but at this point, she would remain interim until the end of this term.
No, so I understood, Leslie, but what I'm saying is, is it not possible to cancel that and reinstate this, or?
So
I think-
could I make a suggestion, maybe that we go ahead and take action on the one that's on the table, and then maybe we could ask staff to bring back, maybe on our Friday bulletin, some clarification from legal about what our options would be for the specific question Jerry and Satish are asking. Would that work for everybody?
Yeah, I'm okay. I was trying to, I think the concern which Jerry raised, I had the similar concern, so that's why.
Great, thanks.
I'm
That's a great
okay
idea.
in either case, yeah, so.
Yeah, it's a great idea, Lori.
Yeah.
I will check, Leslie, are there public comments on this item?
There are none.
Excellent. In that case, then, entertain a motion to approve this contract.
I move to approve the ratification of the 2021 to 2024 superintendent employment contract.
Thank you, Sylvia. And do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Phyllis. All right, let's go and take a vote. On favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion passes 5-0. Congratulations, Stacy.
Thank you very
Yay,
much.
Congratulations, Stacy.
And thank you.
I know that we kind of discussed this at the last board meeting, I want to say at midnight. And so maybe a lot of our community didn't get a chance to hear that conversation. And this may seem like we're just making this decision without any discussion, but that, definitely hearty congratulations. But as you know, as we stated from the last board meeting 2 weeks ago, we're excited to have you. We think that, or well, I don't want to speak for everyone, but like, I'm very excited to have you and look forward to your continued leadership.
I'll just ditto what Sylvia said. She said it really well. And I think she is speaking for all of us when, we're very excited and very happy that you're taking on this role for the district. Right? There's not a better person, I'm convinced, in the world for this role. So thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. Thank you. It resonates in my mind. I've always shared my quote from Einstein that, in every difficulty lies opportunity. And I just know there's so many opportunities ahead for us, and they're going to be in that positive trajectory for our district. So I'm excited to have that opportunity to be in lead.
All right, thank you. All right, let's close out 8.2 then and move on to 9.1, activities and committee reports. Would like to share?
I'll jump in. So there has been a fair bit going on with our County School Boards Association and our State School Boards Association. So I'll just report as our rep. So I know some of you were able to join our legislative event last weekend. County School Boards Association, so about 70 board members and superintendents from across the county met with 10 of our local legislators for both the state Senate as well as the state assembly, a couple of our county supervisors, and then we also got to speak with the president of the State Board of Education, Dr. Linda Darling Hammond. So that was a great event. And let's see, then our Legislative Action Committee for Santa Clara County School Boards Association did write a very fast turnaround letter this last weekend on behalf of all 31 school districts in the county, really speaking to the current conversation going on between several of the Northern California counties and the governor's office on, in particular, the equitable distribution of the vaccine. The governor's office is proposing a equity index, which sends about 40% of the state's vaccine supply down to frankly, Southern California, and doesn't include the census tracts in Northern California with the highest impacted communities. Obviously, that impacts our vaccine supply in Santa Clara County significantly. And as a school boards association, I think we felt that that was a barrier to learning for our families when families don't have equitable access here in Santa Clara County. So our School Boards Association did take action on that and submitted that letter to the governor's office. And then the other thing I will report out on, so Stacy, Sylvia, and I continue our round of meeting with our legislators about CUSD specifically. We did have the opportunity to meet with Senator Cortese this last week, and he took some action items from us, specifically maybe looking into some convenings around regional indexing for a variety of state formulas in which Santa Clara County is, and specifically districts like ours are not receiving a fair distribution of funds in the state formulas because of our super high cost of living here. And then the last thing I just want to bring up is I will report out, because we have gotten a lot of questions around distancing, that right now the conversation at the California Department of Public Health around distancing, really the team leading that is the interdisciplinary team that involves the Health and Human Services Department, the Safe Schools for All team, and the State Board of Education. And so if there are parents that are interested in joining me in writing to the key players in that, I have been, and I'm happy to give anybody some information on names, contacts, and pointers. It's Dr. Mark Galley, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Paula Villasquez, the Assistant Secretary of California Health and Human Services, who also happens to be a trustee at a district up in the Sacramento region, Dr. Naomi Bardak, who is the state lead for the Safe Schools for All team, which is the lead for that California Department of Public Health guidance, and then Brooks Allen, the Executive Director of the State Board of Education. So that is it for me. Tried to go fast. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Lori. Anyone else like to share anything?
I can tell Jerry and I had a board office hours, so it was pretty good last week. Over 100 people attended. Pretty good feedback.
Yeah, we picked up some questions. We'll try to get those answered and posted somewhere in chat. Ran out of time. Yeah, so I'll just mention so I went to the event that Lori organized, the Legislative Act. That's a tongue twister. Action Lunch. It's an amazing piece of organization. Lori invited a number of folks at both the county and the state level who are very busy folks, and get all their schedules to line up and show up at the same time on a weekend. It's an amazing feat of acrobatics. And so I'm sure a lot of work went into it. And it was really, really useful to be able to hear these legislators and sort of their thoughts on this. So I just want to shout out to Lori for organizing that on behalf of all the county school board members. One other thing is at the last meeting, we recognized Lori for her birthday on the board meeting. And I just wanted to call out that the last week we had board birthdays for Phyllis and Sylvia. It was on an off week, so we weren't able to do it publicly, but I just want to recognize your birthdays and say belated happy birthday to both of you.
29 again.
Thank you, Jerry.
Sure. Okay, if there isn't anything else then.
So I just wanted
sorry.
to also just let you know, so I was able to attend Supervisor Cindy Chavez's press conference this afternoon and represent Cupertino District and speak in advocacy for more vaccine equity distribution. One of the things that we've been seeing, and Lori talked about it a little bit, but because our area is not getting the recognition in terms of our most vulnerable populations, it's actually affecting the entire county, not just, certainly the vulnerable population, but also everybody else, because then there's less vaccine to go around for everyone. And so we know that it's affecting our staff, it's affecting our teachers, it's affecting, all of our families and students. And so that's something that we're continuing to do, is that advocacy and pushing to get the governor's office to recognize that we need more local control here. So.
Right. Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, no, that's definitely an important thing to advocate for. I'm reading news reports of appointments getting canceled, right, because of the vaccines not showing up the way they're expected to. So, all right. So then closing out on 9.1, going on to 10, agenda setting. So we have the one item that Lori asked about on the enrollment. And I'd like to suggest also one, and it's probably coming at some point, that with the COVID aid that's available from the state, and I guess our president signed something, and so it seems like there's more money flowing. We'd love to kind of get an update on that. And then I know that we're supposed to submit a plan on this sometime, I think by June 1st. And so I'd love to just have a discussion on how we involve the community in helping us sort of figure out how to put that money to work for our kids. So yeah.
Can I add a friendly request to your request on that, Jerry?
Of course.
Can we also just make sure that whenever that item comes forward, that maybe there could be a slide or somehow cover the one-time use nature of those dollars and the short-term, like 1 year time use on a lot of it, as opposed to what we have already placed on the ballot for 8 years of stability for the district. Thank you.
It's a very important point. Thank you, Lori. Anything else? If not, then we'll move on to item 11. All right, so I adjourn this meeting at 8:55 p.m. Hey, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.